Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of WhatIf sent Deku back in time. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was an accident, really, something one would expect from someone who had no idea what her quirk was or how to control it. All Eri knew was that Deku was hurt, and she wanted to help him just as he was helping her. I don't want Deku hurt was the only thought in her mind. Such a pure, selfless thought, combined with her quirk and the imagination of a child, resulted in something impossible when he caught her. An enormous flash of light came from the horn on Eri's head, and suddenly everything was different. 10 years ago, Izuku cried out as he woke up, only to realize he was much smaller than he had been before catching Eri. He looked around, utterly confused, only to realize that everything looked different, even though he had somehow ended up in his bedroom at home. Even the All Might merchandise was different, and less in number, and all of it was no less than 10 years old. Izuku ran to where he kept his hero analysis journals to check the latest one, only to find a grand total of 3 journals, and none had any of the local pros that had tried dealing with the sludge villain. Then he noticed the date on the calendar. "I'm in trouble," he whispered. He was way back into his own past, back before he even knew that he was quirkless. "Eri, did you do this?" he asked himself. Fortunately, it was easy to fall back into his life pre-UA, especially since Kaken already had his quirk. 2 months passed without a quirk showing up, and Inko decided to take him to the doctor, who, as expected, declared him quirkless again. But this time, he reacted differently, so when Inko showed up, he had something different to say. "See that, Mom? There's always a smile on his face, no matter how bad things get. Even when things seem impossible, he never gives up. That's the kind of hero I'm going to be when I grow up. Even if I have to do it without a quirk," Izuku stated with full confidence. He had decided that this time, he would start preparing his body as early as possible in order to be able to better control One for All. There would be no rushing to prepare his body as a vessel this time, and with any luck, no permanent damage to his hands. The next morning, Izuku started his training on YouTube by watching martial arts training videos. At every chance he got, he studied martial arts videos, from Krav Maga to Shaolin, in order to try and keep his friendship with Kaken and practice the arts he was learning. He took to challenging Kaken to a game of heroes versus villains once he believed he had mastered a lesson. Kaken decided to start calling it a spar when he decided he was too old to play the game. However, it had a different result than what Izuku had expected. Rather than repairing their friendship, it changed their relationship to respectful rivals, though Kaken still claimed superiority due to his quirk. Izuku also started redesigning his costume, starting with his last costume. Eventually, he decided to honor All Might in a different way, by designing his own version of the Golden Age costume, done in Izuku's traditional green coloration though. Shortly after he turned 8, All Might vanished from the scene for months. Even though he knew what had happened, he was still in a near-panic mode until his mentor showed up again. When Izuku was 10 years old, they drove by the Takeover beach and he saw how filthy it already was. He made a decision. "Mom, I want to clean the beach." "Why, honey? It's what a hero would do, Mom. Besides, how many people can't enjoy a beautiful beach because it's covered in garbage? I want to help them out." Inko actually smiled at that and agreed to help however she could. As nice as her abilities were though, Izuku wouldn't let her do anything besides drive him to the dump. Things continued like that for another 3 years until the fateful day of Mount Lady's debut. Mount Lady's debut went about the same, though Izuku winced at hearing Kamui Wood's statement, especially knowing that this measly purse snatcher was nothing compared to even the childish Shigaraki, let alone a true incarnation of evil like All for One. The only change was his reaction to the men and their money shot chant. Curves, he thought, though he was a little surprised that, at the very least, his hormones weren't agreeing with them. Oh well, it was something to think on later, after All Might and One for All. Maybe it was just his mind doing his best to be as different from Minda as possible. At school, everything went according to script until Chisaka-sensei mentioned that Izuku wanted to go to UA as well. Since Kaken knew his abilities, he actually defended his rival when everyone else laughed. "Deku may be quirkless, but at least he works hard enough to make up for it." Then he turned towards the other boy. "But don't think that means I'm going soft on you, Deku. You're still not going to go to UA." Such was the unusual dynamic they now had. Kaken now wavered between hating him even more and actually respecting him depending on his mood. Izuku just smiled and said, "Well, I guess we'll see what the teachers at UA say, won't we, Kaken?" That was the wrong thing to say, as he pulled Hero Analysis for the future number 13 out of Izuku's hand, blew it up and threw it out the window. "Why did you have to turn my dreams into fish food, Kaken? Get this straight, Deku, you're not going to UA. Beat me in the next spar and maybe I'll consider it, Kaken," Izuku growled out. Bakugo stared at the other boy, utterly confused. Usually that was enough to at least set him off, if not result in an out-and-out fight. Something strange was going on with his rival, and he didn't like it. Shortly after the confrontation, Izuku managed to get out of class to retrieve his notebook, which fortunately didn't seem too badly damaged, or at least no more than the first time. Then, after class, he headed towards his destiny, putting some final touches to his costume design until the sludge villain jumped him so quickly he didn't have time to react. All Might, please hurry, Izuku thought as the sludge villain smothered the greenette to death. It couldn't end like this, could it? Izuku passed out just in time to see All Might appear and save him. When he woke up, he fanboyed over All Might just as much as the first time. After all, it had been 10 years since he had seen his idol-turned-mentor, and longer since he had seen his hero form. Then he prepared to leave, but Izuku couldn't let him. Wait, I just have one question to ask. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to answer any questions. Thanks for your continued support, he called out. Fortunately, Izuku had grabbed onto his leg and history continued. Once they had landed and Izuku had recovered from the trip, he asked the question. I'm a normal kid without any powers, but I'm still determined to be a hero. Could I ever hope to be a hero like you? Without a quirk, he asked. People think I don't have a chance, that not having a quirk makes me weak and useless. My classmates make fun of me, but that only makes me more determined. It makes me want to prove them wrong. I've wanted to be a hero since I was a little kid because I thought saving people was the coolest thing one could ever do. I want people to see my fearless smile and feel safe, and be the kind of hero everyone looks up to, just like you. Then he looked up and saw the real Yagi Toshinori once again. Sweet Susanoo, what happened to you? Doing his best to sound like he had no idea what was going on. First, let me assure you that I am All Might, he started, blood dripping out of his mouth. You know those guys at the beach that suck in their gut to look buff? I'm like that. But that doesn't make any sense, Izuku started. Sure, there are quirks that can turn a skinny guy into a buff guy, but they always come at a cost, usually to speed or stamina, something you've never had to deal with. You've effed 4 hours at a time. And, at speed challenged on the be actual. Speedster sput with a cynicism. You're at the hero that saves that day with a fearless million. There's plenty of fear behind that smile, kid, he stated, cutting off the teen's muttering. With that he sat down and showed Izuku his wound again. Pretty gross, right? I got this in a big fight 5 years back. My respiratory system was shot, and I lost my whole stomach. All the surgeries have worn me out, and nothing can be done now. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day as a result. Rest of the time, this is what I look like. 5 years ago. But the only big fight you had that was shown was against Toxic Chainsaw. And I know he couldn't have done this kind of damage to you, Izuku said. This happened right before you disappeared for 6 months, didn't it? You know your stuff. Yeah, I kept this fight under wraps. Didn't want anyone knowing about it even before the fight started. Only a handful of people even know it happened. All of whom I'd trust with my life. I'm the guy who's supposed to always be smiling, right? I'm the symbol of peace. People everywhere have to think I'm never afraid or daunted by evil. Honestly, I smile to hide the fear inside and to trick myself. It's just a brave face I put on when the pressure is high. This job isn't easy. Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So no, I don't think you can become a hero, not without a quirk. Izuku looked at him and smiled, remembering how many times he had already risked his life for others. I know you have to risk your lives every day, All Might. Knowing you're afraid just makes you one of the bravest men I've ever known and makes me want to be a hero even more. I'm going to take your words as a challenge to do even better than before. Toshinori simply stared at the greenette, as if he couldn't figure him out. Then he told Izuku to go for a more attainable dream and walked out. Damn, I had hoped I'd be able to simply talk him around here. Now what am I going to do? That's when the explosion went off, and Izuku paled, as he knew what had happened. Not again, Kaken's going to kill me for that. He then checked his bag for a special something he had bought specifically for this day and ran off. Izuku ran off as quickly as possible, but he still got there after All Might did. Even worse was that he heard several people questioning not only the local heroes, but even All Might. How long had All for One and Shimura been campaigning in secret against the heroes? Seconds later, he spotted Kaken and charged off after the villain. The green had been preparing for this day since he came back, and he had a plan this time. Once he was close enough, he yelled, "Let him go, you damned bastard." Then Izuku threw his bag, hitting the villain in the eye, which allowed Kaken to breathe again. Damn it, Deku, what are you doing here? He demanded. Do you really think I could just stand by and watch you die, Kaken? Besides, there was something in your eyes asking for help. I had to do something. The villain then moved his head down towards Izuku, allowing him to do the most dangerous thing yet. Izuku slashed at the villain's eye with a knife, a move actually inspired by Stain. However, it only enraged the creature, and he moved to crush the teen, only for the arm to be caught. I really am pathetic, All Might said. I told you the traits that make a true hero, but I see now I wasn't living up to my own ideals or putting what I said into practice. Pros are always risking their lives. That's the true test of a hero. He yelled as he grabbed Kaken and hit the villain with a Detroit smash. As before, the smash obliterated the villain and started a brief shower. The heroes and police gathered up the scattered remains of the villain and carted him off to Tartarus. The media swarmed All Might. Some heroes praised Kaken for standing up to the villain and his quirk, while others turned on Izuku. You moron, do you have a death wish? Kamui demanded. There was absolutely no reason for you to put yourself in danger like that. Death Arms agreed. No reason, Izuku demanded. Kaken is practically my brother, and you lot were standing around doing nothing while he was being smothered. I can think of something that 3 of you could have done to save him, yet you did nothing. Either of you could have at least pulled Kaken out, fire or no fire, Kamui, and Backdraft could have washed the villain away. But no, you just stood there. At least I tried, and you can never make me regret it. The two blanched, though whether they were shocked at what Izuku said or if he actually made them regret their actions, Izuku had no idea. Kaken caught up with him afterwards, yelling at the other boy about looking down on him, but Izuku stopped him there. Kaken, I would never look down on you, let alone think of you as weak. You're one of the strongest people I know. Then why did you try to help? Because sometimes, even the strongest person in the world needs help, Kaken. Besides, All Might saved me from it before, and it was my fault he managed to escape and get a hold of you. I'm sorry. Kaken just stood there for a moment before saying thanks for at least trying to clean up your mess. But I still don't owe you anything, he yelled before storming off again. Then, right on schedule, All Might showed up. If you hadn't told me about your life, if you hadn't run into that fight, I'd have been another worthless bystander and eventually become a guy in a bodysuit who was all talk, unworthy of being called a hero. So, thanks. You told me you didn't have a power, so when I saw this quirkless boy with more guts than sense try to save a life, it inspired me to act too. There are stories of every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own. His eyes burst into tears, because while Izuku had prepared for the events, he had once again moved without thinking about it. 6 months of work as a hero were hard to suppress, especially when they strengthen one's natural instinct. And today, that's what happened to you. Then he said it, the words that only he had ever said before Izuku had his quirk. Young man, you too can become a hero. The tears flowed like a river once again. Then he said it. I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. Now, even though Izuku had been looking forward to those words for more than 10 years, he still reacted as he had before. No point in giving up the game this early. Besides, there are no hints whatsoever that One for All existed throughout history, and he had looked hard, hoping to find the other wielders. What do you mean, inherit your quirk? There are a couple things you should know about my abilities. Journalists always guess my quirk is super strength, some kind of invulnerability or boost. When people ask in interviews, I make a joke and dodge the question. That's because the world needs to believe their symbol of peace is just a natural-born hero like any of them. But I'm going to tell you the truth. There's nothing natural about my ability. I wasn't born with this power. It's a sacred torch that was passed on to me from someone else. And you're next. I can give you my abilities. Wait, hold on, this is a lot to process. It's true, there's a lot of debate as to what your quirk actually is. I see it discussed all the time on forums. Nobody's ever figured it out. It's one of the biggest mysteries out there. But well, they'd off a quirk being passed on by something other than genetic sizzle butin heard off. Stop an ERDING out. Toshinori yelled at him. I've hidden things, but I've never lied. You're going to have to adjust your reality and accept this new truth. I can transfer my quirk to someone else. The power to transfer power is just one facet of my secret ability. The true name of my quirk is One for All. One person cultivates the power, then passes it to another person. It continues to grow as it's passed along. It is this cultivated power that allows me to save those in need of a hero, the truth behind my strength. But why me, All Might? Why give your quirk to me of all people? What if I can't live up to it? I was on a long hunt for a worthy successor. And then, I watched you jump into action as the rest of us stood idly by. You may just be a quirkless fanboy, but you tried to save that kid. You acted like more of a hero than anyone else there. And you couldn't have found others like that at UA. Izuku asked. I'm sure that's why you're here in Musutafu in the first place. You're right. Principal Nezu did have a student in mind to be my successor. He may even be a worthy one. Why choose you though? Toshinori thought about that for a minute before responding. Because I see an unquenchable fire in you, young Midoriya, the kind of fire that One for All feeds until it is a star shining in the darkness. What do you say? Do you want One for All or not? Like I could possibly say no to an opportunity like this. Of course my answer is yes. No hesitation or reluctance. That's exactly how I figured you'd respond. Good, in that case, meet me at Takoba Beach tomorrow morning. The next morning, Izuku had his mom drop him off at the beach early and went back to work cleaning the beach. By the time All Might had arrived, he had finished clearing out the new garbage that had washed up. I honestly thought this place would be much worse off than it is, Toshinori said. Oh, it used to be horrible, Izuku replied as he dropped off another piece of garbage. But I saw it 4 years ago and decided someone should clean it up. And since the government wasn't, then why not me? Well, then that means this shouldn't take as long as I feared. What shouldn't take as long? Izuku asked, again to keep up appearances. You're not physically ready to take on my quirk just yet. The combined physical abilities of everyone who's ever used it creates a hurricane of pure force. An unprepared body can't fully inherit it. Your arms and legs would shoot off if you tried to. I was afraid preparing your body enough for it would take until the entrance exams for the hero schools. But with any luck and your work beforehand, we should be able to finish in plenty of time, not to mention give you time to practice with one for all. Then he turned to the teen and asked, why did you decide to clean the beach in the first place? I want to be a hero, even without a quirk. And before quirks, heroes were the ones that did community services without being asked or paid for it. I figured, even if I never became a pro hero, I could at least do this. Then something hit him. Wait, if physical fitness is needed to handle one for all, then what about you, All Might? What about me? Well, your other form is basically a skeleton. And you said you've lost your stomach, right? I'm betting you haven't been taking care of yourself as well as the doctors would like, which would mean you're losing time as a hero as a result. All Might just stared at me in shock while Izuku pulled out his phone. Hey, Mom, could you prepare another place for supper? Oh, and make something for someone who doesn't have a stomach, please. Of course I can do that, Izuku. But may I ask who you're bringing home? It's someone from Might Tower, Mom. He's helping me train for UA, but he won't accept payment. And about 5 years ago, he was hurt in a villain attack and lost his stomach. He hasn't been taking care of himself since. I was thinking a decent meal would be a good way to thank him. Oh, Izuku, you and your big heart. Of course we can do that. In fact, tell him that if he doesn't come every day he helps train you, I'll come down to that beach and drag him to dinner by the ear. Oh, and I need to find out what's safe for him to eat. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at the idea, and the image he had in his mind. I'll tell him, Mom. You know, you don't have to do that, Toshinori said. I know, but I do owe you for helping with this. Besides, I want to make sure you live to see me graduate. And I'd worry about you if you didn't take better care of yourself. Toshinori turned to him and Izuku gave him the saddest puppy dog eyes he could. Of course, he caved, but not before insisting that they come up with a cover story about One for All. Izuku immediately suggested that they say he had a power accumulation quirk, one that naturally took a while to build up to a point where it was noticeable. Toshinori gave him an odd look, but agreed to go with it, and that was how Inko was introduced to Yagi Toshinori. She immediately realized why Izuku had called and took over his diet, and it became common for the teen to see Toshinori with some kind of protein shake whenever he was training with him. In fact, by the time Izuku finished his training, his mentor was back to a relatively healthy weight and had boosted his time limit up to 5 hours. A week into said training, and Izuku brought up one of the subjects he hoped to get help with. Yagi-sensei, do you think you could look into something for me? Oh, what's that, young Midoriya? Izuku simply handed him a couple papers, which only raised the hero's curiosity. When he read the papers though, he understood some of it. The first was a small article concerning Todoroki Rei, Endeavor's wife being put in an insane asylum, while the second concerned a fire that supposedly killed Inji's eldest son, Taoya. What do you want me to look into? What happened to Mrs. Todoroki? And did anyone ever find out what caused the fire? What about Taoya? Did anyone ever find a body, or is he still technically missing? Tell you what, I have a friend in the police, so I'll talk to him and see what he can dig up. 6 months of training passed and Toshinori deemed Izuku ready to inherit his quirk again. Someone told me this once. There's a difference between being lucky and deserving. One's an accident, the other a reward. Never get the two confused. Take that to heart, young man. This gift, you've earned it through your own valiant efforts. Eat this, he finished, offering me one of his hairs. To gain my power you have to swallow some of my DNA. He explained as I just stared at the hair. Well, could be worse, I suppose, the greenette said as he took it. How's that? All Might asked. Well, at least you're not some kind of perv, Izuku hinted with a smile probably reminiscent of Kaken. All Might immediately collapsed into Toshinori, coughing up blood at his comment. Izuku just laughed and ate the hair. After school that day, All Might took Izuku to an empty gym close to UA so he could test out One for All. All right, young man, let's see you try to use your quirk on this, he said, pointing out a punching bag. Izuku tried for several minutes, but he just couldn't figure out how to activate One for All. It's not working, All Might. I need something to help me figure out how to use it. A trigger. That's it, All Might. I want you to describe a scenario where I would have to use One for All to protect others. All Might considered that for a minute. Very well, close your eyes to help envision the scenario. It's a peaceful day after school. Myself and some of your friends have gathered just to relax and reflect. Good idea. But who would work for friends? Two faces were quick to come to mind, Shoto and Uraraka. Yeah, Mom would love to meet them, especially after Shoto deals with some of his issues. A good time is being had by all, until a villain shows up, intent on killing all of us. Izuku could see it all too easily. Kurogiri's warp gate opening up, and Shimura stepping out, hand on his face and murder in his eyes. Stay away from us. Smash! Izuku yelled out, throwing a punch to where he saw Shigaraki. The greenette opened his eyes just as the pain started to hit. But Pain was an old friend by now thanks to sparring with Kaken, so Izuku was able to ignore it long enough to see the damage. The bag was gone, as was the entire wall behind it, and his arm was completely shattered. Izuku groaned, upset at having to deal with the shattered arm again, while Toshinori called Recovery Girl as quickly as possible. When Izuku was recovered, he was quick to assure Toshinori that he'd have one for all figured out in time for the entrance exam, and he promised to ask for help if he hadn't figured something out in 2 weeks. Fortunately, thanks to his previous training with Gran Torino after the sports festival, Izuku knew where to start. By the end of the 2 weeks, full cowl had been perfected. With that done, Izuku decided to experiment and went to another source for help, the internet. The teen had found a website all about giving advice for quirk use, so he set up an account and posted something. Small might. So, I have a power accumulation quirk, but I have too much power to safely handle. I know someone with a similar quirk, and he seems to be able to use it to become invulnerable. But his control was fantastic even from an early age. Does anyone know someone with a quirk like invulnerability? I'm something of a quirk nerd, so I'd be glad to help out with any other quirk questions you might have. By the end of the week, Izuku had received a response, and from a very surprising source. Red Riot. Hey, Small Might. I actually have a quirk like that, so maybe I could help out. I don't actually need help with my quirk, but I do have a friend that could use an idea if you're still willing. Small Might. I'd be glad to help your friend, Red Riot. If you know Takoba Beach near Musutafu, I train there most evenings after school. Phantom Thief, Takoba Beach. Why would you train at a dump? Battle Fist. You clearly haven't been near Takoba recently. Someone has been cleaning it up for the last few years. I went by yesterday and didn't see so much as one speck of trash. Small Might. That was how I started my training there, cleaning it up. 2 days later, Izuku was swimming at Takoba when he saw 3 people show up, all around his age, so he started swimming towards them. By the time he got to the beach, Izuku had recognized 2 of them from his previous life. Hi, I assume one of you is Red Riot. Yeah, but my real name is Kirishima Ijiro. This is Kaminari Denki, a friend of mine. Are you Small Might? The black-haired boy asked. The response caused Izuku to freeze for a moment before noticing enough features that he could recognize Kaken's best friend. Yeah, Midoriya Izuku, he finally replied. Then he turned to the unnamed blonde and asked, so, who are you? Monomanito, or as you might remember me, Phantom Thief. I just couldn't believe Kendo when she said the beach had been cleaned and I had to see for myself. Besides, I want to see if you can help this poor idiot here when our quirk specialist couldn't. Izuku though about that. As for the most part, Kaminari seemed to have a good handle on his quirk before, so he was curious. So, why do you need help, Kaminari? Well, alright, but if my quirk counselor couldn't help, I don't know why you could. No offense. I have no way to use my electric quirk at long range, I just hit everything. Also, if I use too much power, I have a problem. Monoma laughed at that. A problem, you say? Kaminari, you turn into a buffoon if you go over your wattage limit. Immediately his mind went to work on the problem. Well, for long range. That's easy, you need a support item, some kind of conductive wire that can work along the lines of a taser. As for your power problem, I'd have to suggest an electrolyte-heavy diet to boost the amount of electricity that you can use. The trio just stared at the greenette in shock. What? I told you that I was a quirk nerd. I have 13 journals worth of notes on the top heroes as it is. Kirishima was the first to recover. Yeah, I think we underestimated you, Midoriya. So, how can I help? I want to know how you activate your quirk. With a quick explanation of infusing power into his bones, muscles, and skin, full infusion was born. Interestingly, it worked fairly similar to the change between Toshinori and All Might. Izuku bulked up a little and grew a few inches in height while also making him tough enough that he barely felt it when Kirishima hit him. The final 3 months until the exam were focused on increasing his power output, not that it helped much. Even with cowling and infusion, Izuku still couldn't handle more than 15% at a time without straining himself. In any case, the day of the entrance exam came. He was determined not to make a fool of himself, but in his excitement, Izuku still tripped over his own 2 feet. However, that resulted in "Are you okay? I stopped you with my quirk. Sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you." "No, thanks for that," Izuku said with a smile before offering his hand. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I hope to see you again. Uraraka Achako." and I'm sure we will. Well, good luck. Izuku smiled, already looking forward to renewing his friendship with the gravity girl. The first 2 hours were taken up by the written exam, which wasn't too bad this time. After that, they gathered to hear the rules for the practical exam. President Mike's address went as normal, including Ada's interruption. Then they broke for lunch and went to their practical examination locations. Unfortunately, Izuku didn't see Kaminari, Kirishima, or Monomaso the moment he saw President Mike. He charged up full cowling and infusion, then charged into the area. Izuku spent most of the exam keeping track of where everyone was and only destroyed a few of the small robots. There was no freezing this time. The robots were nothing compared to Shigaraki, Stain, or any of the other actual villains he had faced. Then it arrived, and with its first punch, the zero-pointer once again trapped Uraraka under some rubble. Immediately Izuku ran to her, threw the rubble off her and rushed her to the others. Midoriya turned to go back when Ida grabbed him. "What do you think you're doing? There's no fighting that thing, nor is there any point." "Isn't there?" Izuku asked before wrenching himself free. "That thing is too dangerous to leave standing. How many people could it crush if we just leave it alone? What kind of hero are you if you're unwilling to face a true threat?" To further motivate himself as he leapt between buildings, constantly gaining altitude, he remembered what All Might told him he was thinking at the time. Now things get interesting. An overwhelming threat has appeared. A person's true character is revealed when they're faced with danger. There are no points awarded for taking on a humongous villain, but there is opportunity, a chance to shine, to show what you're really made of. Once Izuku was in position, he focused one for all into his arm and shouted, "United States of Smash." Ada Tenya just stared at where the green-haired boy had gone, utterly confused. What did he mean there was a point to taking on that giant robot? It made no sense. Suddenly an explosion rocked the area, causing everyone to look back towards the zero-pointer. But rather than see what caused it, all anyone could see was an enormous twister surrounding where the robot had been. "Midoriya," the girl cried out. "Did you say Midoriya?" a new voice asked. Ada turned and found a black-haired boy with sharp teeth walking up. "I looked for him when I got here and never saw him. Where is he?" "He took on the zero-pointer to protect all of us," Ada said. Wait, was that it? Had he just subconsciously realized why Midoriya thought there was a point in facing it? Just then, the weather changed and it started raining. How did that happen? Did the twister change the weather? "Hey, the dust is clearing," another examinee shouted. Everyone looked up and stared at the results. The massive zero-pointer had been utterly destroyed, the height of it crushed down to no more than 9 feet of metal, and on top of it, Midoriya with his left arm raised in All Might's typical victory stance. Kirishima chuckled at that, having learned just how much of an All Might fan his new friend was. But wait, why was his left hand raised? Midoriya was right-handed, so there could only be one reason for why he raised his left. He couldn't use his right. That was confirmed when Recovery Girl showed up and healed his right arm. "Hey, Midoriya, Kirishima," he called out with a smile. "How'd you do? 39 points overall. I just hope that's enough to pass. How about you? I mean, besides that massive one you were standing on." "Oh, couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 points. Kirishima stared at his friend in confusion. "Aren't you worried at all? That doesn't really sound like enough points to get in. And there's more to being a hero than beating up villains," the Greenette responded. "All Might's debut was saving people from an earthquake, remember?" Ida smacked himself. Of course, that was what Midoriya had meant. Heroes weren't just there to stop villains, they were there to protect the civilians. 8 days later and Izuku met with All Might again. This time, he actually gained a few more rescue points and 10 villain points, putting him at 80 points overall in the practical. Uraraka still tried to give him her points for saving her, which meant she still gained her rescue points and also made it in. "Toshinori-sensei," Izuku called out. "Young Midoriya, congrats on getting in," Toshinori said with a smile. "Hey, just so you know, I didn't pull any strings at UA. All I did was observe. No one in acceptance knows I've been training you, and I wasn't one of the judges. I know you'd think of that as cheating." Midoriya nodded at that, glad that his mentor understood him as well as he did, and that he himself hadn't changed too much. "So, what happened? You said you had control, but you still broke your arm." Izuku rubbed the back of his head. "Yeah, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to take down the zero-pointer with the power I can use right now, so I just hit it as hard as I could." Toshi just laughed at that, though the thought process was understandable. "Oh, I did hear something that you might want to have someone look into." Toshinori raised an eyebrow at his successor. "This isn't going to be something like the Todoroki situation, is it?" Sukachi was starting to get a little curious about who had put him onto whatever the Todoroki situation was turning into. However, the detective refused to explain how it was developing, no matter how many times Toshinori asked. "Well, maybe," Izuku replied. "I heard one of the examinees, I didn't see who, mentioned something about a drug called Rewind. He said something about the Yakuza developing it from a human source and that it could make Quirk stronger." "A human source?" All Might growled out, his rage causing him to change form. I guarantee that not only will this drug be found, but whoever did this will be utterly destroyed. Naturally, his transformation once again caught the attention of the civilians on the pier, and they had to run. 1 month later, Izuku walked into Wana and found the same situation he had walked into before, Ada berating Kaken for how he was sitting. Izuku just shook his head, knowing that neither of them would ever change. Kaken, leave private school alone, he doesn't know any better. He'll learn eventually. I don't need your help with this extra, Deku, Bakugo replied. Ada on the other hand stared at Izuku in shock at being called private school. I know you don't, Kaken, Izuku said with a smile. Speaking of extras though, Izuku then called Kirishima over. Kirishima, meet Bakugo Katsuki. Kaken, meet Kirishima Ijiro. I've got a feeling the two of you will be great friends. If you're just here to make friends, you can pack your stuff up now and leave. This is the hero course, we don't have time for that. With that, Aizawa stood up and got out of his bag, criticizing them for irrationally wasting time. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head out to the field. Izuku raised an eyebrow at that, as he had assumed that Aizawa-sensei had them do the test due to how horribly he had done in the entrance exam, and that threatening them with expulsion was his own way of protecting Izuku. Then again, Aizawa and Toshi had always had a bit of a problematic relationship, and Izuku had chosen to act more like All Might than his previous life, so maybe that was the reason. Uraraka again complained about Aizawa's methods, only for him to counter with his speech. You think natural disasters are fair? Or power-hungry villains? Or catastrophic disasters whose time or place can't be predicted and can wipe out whole cities? No, the world is full of unfairness. It's a hero's job to combat that unfairness. If you want to be a hero, you're going to have to push yourself to the brink. For the next 3 years, UA will throw one terrible hardship after another at you. So go beyond, plus ultra style. Show me it's no mistake you're here. Overcome it with everything you've got. The Quirk assessment test went as before, with one exception. Since he had greater control of OFA, Izuku was able to move faster and use his strength better than the first time. However, it seemed Aizawa's bias got the better of him, as he still erased OFA and gave his speech about Izuku not being able to be a hero, despite his drive. You're wrong, Aizawa-sensei. I have control, and I will be a hero, no matter the cost. With that, he turned and threw the ball as hard as he could using 25% of one for all, sending it flying a full kilometer away. Using that much power put a strain on his body, but for the test, it was worth it, especially for such a short amount of time. By the time the test was over, Izuku had made it into 5th place overall. Deku, you've got some explaining to do. Kaken yelled out. Later, Kaken, I promise. You have some explaining to do, Midoriya. You haven't been showing off the power that would be needed to take down the zero-pointer, so what's going on? Aizawa demanded. I have a power accumulation quirk, sensei, but if I use all of it, I break my own bones. I don't believe that, but let's test that claim. With that, a large machine was rolled out onto the field. This, as you might have guessed, is a punching machine. Hit it and it will measure the strength of the blow. Don't worry about breaking it. The last person to do that was All Might, and it's been reinforced since then. Midoriya is going first, and no holding back this time. Izuku nodded before pulling his arm back and yelling out Texas Smash. Immediately, the machine was shattered into 1,000 pieces. Still don't believe me, sensei? He asked as he held his broken arm. I'm going to Recovery Girl now, unless you have something else to say. Aizawa just stared in shock, allowing Izuku to leave. Naturally, Kaken didn't buy the power accumulation quirk story. What's the truth, Deku? And don't feed me another bullshit story. You know how close our moms are, and that your mom talked to mine about your little doctor's visit. You honestly don't have a quirk naturally, yet now you do. I want the truth. Izuku thought about that for a while, keeping the secret as long as he had helped them both grow in his previous life. But now maybe they could grow in a different way. They were already rivals, and in a much friendlier manner than before, and he already knew he could trust Kaken to keep the secret, but would Toshi agree? That was the big problem, wasn't it? It's not just my secret, Kaken, but I will tell you as soon as I can, I promise. Bakugo stared at Izuku for a while before nodding and walking out of the locker room, apparently accepting the promise. Once his arm was healed, Ida and Uraraka met up with him and walked to the train station together. As before, Uraraka accidentally called him Deku, to which Izuku was quick to correct her. Actually, my name is Izuku. Deku is just a nickname Kaken gave me, and a lot of people use it as a way to make fun of me. I like it. It sounds like the word for you can do it, so it would make a great hero name. Thanks, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth these days. I've been thinking about a hero name for a while now, and it's not going to be Deku. Izuku replied. Uraraka gave a sad look at that, before Izuku said, but that doesn't mean you can't call me that. I like what you mean when you call me Deku. Before, Uraraka's encouragement and reimagination of the meaning had been enough for him to claim it as his hero name. But even 5 more years of bullying had been enough to utterly ruin the name for him. Fortunately, he had found a good name shortly afterwards. All Might for once was smiling on the inside as much as he was on the outside. These young prospective heroes already seemed promising, speaking of whom. His protege was proving quite interesting with his costume design. While it was clearly based on his famous Golden Age costume, it also had signs of someone with some experience, such as bracers on the arms and legs and armored soles in his shoes. But that wasn't important right now. What was important was that Izuku and young Uraraka were about to face young Bakugo and Ida in combat. Yes, his scenario was based on a classic American action film, but having spent several years there, he had a soft spot in his heart for everything American. Besides, he had set this up specifically to see how his students used their quirks in combat and their natural fighting styles, which would then help him teach them to be more effective in battle. Naturally, that meant that he had to grade absolutely fairly. There would be nothing in his actions to make anyone accuse him of any kind of favoritism. Not that young Midoriya seemed to need any favoritism, considering his odd request. But the time for reflection was over. The show was about to start. Remember, Infinity Girl, the job is to recover the weapon, nothing more. No matter who the villains are, all we do is recover the missile. I know that. You don't need to keep reminding me. And how many times do I have to tell you? Deku, the name is Uravity. Izuku smiled at that. What can I say? Your internship with 13 left an impression. Well, then in the ball throw. What's going on? And how can we hear this? Kaminari asked. Young Midoriya proposed letting you hear things once the test began. And both he and young Bakugo decided to roleplay as if this were an actual mission. All Might explained. Here's a better question. Why is Midoriya breaking down doors? And why is Uraraka carrying them? Gyro asked. Honestly, All Might had been wondering the same thing, but knowing his protege, there was a method behind the apparent madness of his actions. But before anyone else could think of a response, there was a large explosion near Team Uravity. Find another way around and get to the weapon. But I know who it is, Uravity, and I can deal with him. Now go. Midoriya turned and smiled into the smoke. Same old Kaken. You just couldn't resist coming straight for me, even if it would be smarter for you to stay and defend that missile you stole. We have some unfinished business, Deku, and I'm not giving up until I beat you. Bakugo charged at Midoriya, only for the Greenette to catch his arm by the gauntlet and throw him over his shoulder. How? Bakugo gasped from his place on the floor. You haven't changed since we were kids, Kaken. You may be Bakuhatsu no Kami now, but even now you still start your fight with a big right hook. How many times do I have to beat you up before you change? Even when I wasn't using my quirk, I could beat you. Do you really think you can win now? Bakugo attacked again, but Midoriya caught his leg with capture tape. The blonde followed up with another right hook that Midoriya again managed to dodge. Can you even hit me without trying a sneak attack? Kaken, why is Midoriya taunting Bakugo so much? Zero asked. Seems like that's only going to backfire. And why is he running away? It could be that Midoriya is planning something, but only time will tell, Fumikage responded. What will prove interesting now though is that Uraraka has found Ida. Ida had been hyping himself up to get into the persona of a villain, but Uraraka had prepared herself several minutes ago. Ida, prepare to die, you damn traitor. And now the watchers understood why Midoriya had been giving her the doors, as she started hurling them at Ida, seemingly consumed by rage. You'll pay for killing my parents, you traitorous bastard. She was so dangerous that she actually chased him out of the room and away from the missile, but she didn't seem to care about that. Well, that is until she reported weapons in the middle of the 5th floor. Well, that's unexpected, but it's still a poor showing, Yaoyorozu said. She could win right now if she weren't so intent on wait. Is she actually trying to kill him? She asked in shock when a door landed a little too close to Ida's neck for comfort. No way. I wouldn't have thought she had it in her, Ashido said. However, that was when young Todoroki spoke up. Can we see where they are in the building? All Might agreed, and the building plan appeared as a 3D hologram. I thought so, he said with a smug tone. Okay, what are you seeing that we aren't, Shoto? Yaoyorozu asked. Well, that was interesting. He hadn't realized Nimuri and Inji were that close. He may have to speak to Nimuri after this. What seems like chaos is actually quite controlled. Midoriya has been in charge of the entire fight. Midoriya and Uraraka are leading their opponents to the same end of the building. Midoriya's taunts are causing Bakugo to lose his temper. And when the time is right, Midoriya will strike, trapping Ida and leaving Uraraka free to secure the objective. That's a brilliant deduction, young Todoroki. I expected nothing less from you. All Might complimented the heterochromatic boy. Surprisingly though, the young man seemed to be almost upset at the compliment. Yet another hint towards trouble in the Todoroki household. He would have to keep a better eye on both Inji and young Shoto in the future. Come on, Kaken. How did you ever expect to beat All Might when you can't even beat me? Midoriya taunted. Bakugo absolutely lost it at that and decided to use his gauntlet to attack. But Izuku made him proud there. Massachusetts smash. That wasn't one of his so young Midoriya decided to add kicks in. Good. That meant his successor was planning on being his own hero rather than just trying to copy him. The new smash did exactly what young Todoroki predicted. The blast was pushed upwards through the building, cutting it off from the main hallway and weakening the area enough that he dared not use his quirk to escape. Bakugo was so shocked by the result that young Midoriya managed to easily bind him with the capture tape. It doesn't matter if you've stopped me, Deku, you can't secure the weapon in time. My ultimate explosion is all but ensured by now. Wait, what's Bakugo talking about? Kaminari asked. Both of the villains have been secured, haven't they? Doesn't that mean the heroes won? Under normal circumstances, I'd agree. However, young Midoriya insisted on using more realistic standards, All Might explained. His explanation was that if you capture the villains, the weapon can still detonate, while if you secure the weapon but leave the villains, they can resecure the weapon or at the very least escape to cause havoc again. Therefore, he asked that the heroes only win if they can both stop the villains and secure the weapon in time. That's not fair, Kirishima complained. Why did Midoriya have to go first and set such high standards? It's just unmanly and very much not plus ultra if we use your standards now. All Might, no offense. All Might just beamed at the response. None taken whatsoever, young Kirishima. Young Midoriya asked for no extra points for using his higher standards. But if you all wish to use his standards, well, there's no reason for me to say no, is there? No sir. The entire class chorused, announcing their intention to use the higher standard. All Might beamed all the more at the response. Not only was Midoriya shaping up to be a leader and a good influence, but the entire class was jumping at the chance to go beyond as a result. He couldn't be more proud. Speaking of which, the hero team wins. He called out as both Izuku and Uraraka touched the weapon with 2 minutes to spare. Young Midoriya was quick to rescue Ada, but when he came to Bakugo, he didn't release him right away. Remember our deal, Kaken? Yeah, I know, Deku. I hate you right now, but a deal's a deal. Subconsciously, everyone leaned forward, curious as to what was about to happen. Curses, foiled again. For a moment there was silence, until everyone burst out laughing at the cliched villain line while Midoriya thanked Bakugo and let him out of the capture tape. So, what was that last bit about Midoriya, Bakugo? Ojiro asked. Bakugo just growled while Midoriya laughed but decided to explain. Well, as you've probably guessed, Kaken and I have known each other for all our lives. Back when we played Heroes vs. Villains, we made a deal that the loser would say a cliched line about the loss. And what was the line if the hero lost? Ribbit? Asui asked. It were the day you bested me. The entire class laughed at the answer, and even Bakugo smiled at the response. With the battle finished, the review went quickly, with Midoriya and his genius plan winning MVP. As the others went into their battles, All Might noticed Midoriya muttering to himself and taking copious notes in yet another of his hero analysis notebooks, sometimes asking questions of his classmates to ensure he understood their quirks. Well, that would certainly make the sports festival interesting, especially if he went up against one of his classmates during the one-on-one battles. The next day, the media showed up as before and one of them demanded to know what All Might was teaching them. He's actually teaching us a lot about what's needed for us to be good heroes, including how to make a quick getaway from the media, Izuku said before speeding away so fast he left the media literally eating his dust. Inside, Aizawa told them to choose their class representative and as before, Ida proposed an election. Kirishima was quick to stand up and ask, okay, is anyone stupid enough to not vote for Midoriya? Wait, what? Izuku was quick to demand. Why me? Because you pushed us to go beyond yesterday, to treat the exercise as unfair reality rather than a fair game. You are an inspiration and the best embodiment of a hero in our class thus far. I agree with Kirishima. It would be foolish to not choose Midoriya as our class representative, Takoyami explained. A minute of silence later, Kaken just smirked. Congrats, Deku. You're living up to All Might's rep and it's only day 3. So shitty hair, what's next? Obviously, we still need a vice representative, and Ida's suggestion sounds like as good idea as any, Shoto responded. Within 5 minutes the election had been held and the votes tallied, resulting in Yaoyorozu winning the election with 3 votes and Ida receiving 2. At lunch, Midoriya led his 2 friends over to where Shoto and Momo were sitting. Shoto raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why are you sitting here, Midoriya? Is it so hard to believe I want to make a new friend?" Shoto scoffed at that. I'm not here to make friends, and as I recall, Aizawa-sensei said that if you're here to make friends, you should just leave. Correction, he said if we're just here to make friends, we should leave. Having at least a good working relationship with others is necessary to be a good hero, especially when you need to ally with other agencies or when you work with sidekicks and subordinates. Besides, I have a plan for the future that basically demands I make friends, or at the very least allies. You already have a plan for the future? Momo asked. What kind of plan? A plan to replace the symbol of peace, Midoriya stated. He said it so calmly that one might have thought he was talking about the weather. Then again, he had been planning this for years now. Ida had the misfortune of taking a drink at the time, resulting in him spitting it out in shock. No one laughed, as everyone else was as shocked as Ida. Replace All Might? Shoto asked. What do you mean by that? For that, I need to explain a little history. Do you remember what happened 5 years ago? All Might disappeared for a few months, and ever since then, his time in the public has been dropping, and as a result, his support has been falling. Remember the sludge villain incident that happened last year? People were doubting All Might because he hadn't stopped the guy after someone had seen him chasing him earlier. All Might is the symbol of peace, but for how much longer? And what happens when he retires? I'll tell you what I see. I see an age of chaos rising to take his place, just like how Japan was before All Might. Then someone else will take his place, Sato replied. Wait, when did he show up? Actually, why was the entirety of Wano gathered around this table now? And who would replace him? Izuku asked. Endeavor is an asshole who only ranks as high as he does because of his win rate. Hawks is too modest and controlled by the Public Safety Commission. Everyone else is either too weak, too unpopular, or have too bad a win rate. Shoto raised an eyebrow at the first comment. Not many would dare to say a negative word about his father, even fewer in front of him or his siblings. Besides which, even if someone did manage to replace All Might as the symbol of peace, it would result in the same problem a few years later. A single symbol of peace can be killed. Loser will need to retire. Then what is your solution? Momo asked. How does one replace All Might? That's actually the easy part, Yaoyorozu. Call me Momo. It will be easier for us to work together, Midoriya. Well then, in that case, you can call me Izuku. Now, the thing is, no one person can replace All Might. But what about a team of heroes? There are plenty of hero agencies in Japan. Deku, what makes your idea so unique? Uraraka asked. Because what I'm thinking of is not one hero leading a group of sidekicks, but an alliance of heroes that work together as equals, kind of like the Americans' Justice League or Avengers. Heroes can join or leave as they wish for whatever reason. The point is that the team continues, no matter what. A team is unassailable. A team is unkillable. A team cannot retire. That is how you replace the symbol of peace. Such a team could work, but it may also backfire. Ida stated, its very strength would invite challenge. Challenge incites conflict. And conflict breeds catastrophe. Except you forget what else results. Conflict may breed catastrophe, but it also incites growth, either mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. Aren't we all already stronger just from the tests that All Might and Aizawa-sensei put us through? Izuku asked. Everyone nodded at that, easily seeing his point. Also, it is during catastrophes that you see just how great humans can be. When else do you see people pull together like never before? Nations supporting each other, small acts of kindness that mean so much to a single person but will never be known by those in charge. And you wonder why it was a unanimous vote to make you class rep? Jiru asked. That could actually what now? She asked as an alarm sounded. A level 3 security breach means someone has gotten past the school barriers. It's never happened before. A third-year student explained. Wait, it's never happened before. Izuku asked. Is that a problem? Jiru asked. Well, yeah. And you can see the effects now, Izuku replied, pointing at everyone else. Even Minda could see what he meant as the entire school was in panic mode. At least in Aldera we had drills so we knew what we should do when something like this happened, and no one panicked as a result. Momo, you think you can create something to help calm people down? Momo was quick to do so, and Ada's keen eyes helped them spot the media and calm everyone down. While the panic died down, Izuku pulled out his phone and started texting. Small Might, did you know that UA hasn't had alarm drills in at least 2 years? Symbol of peace, no, I hadn't. I assume there's a reason for this. Small Might, the media got past the barrier, and everyone panicked as a result. Symbol of peace, I'll talk to Nezu about that right away. Okay, 3 more notes. First, Izuku's costume is basically what you see during the overhaul, Eri arc, but with 2 adjustments, no mask and his chest pieces, as I said in the story. A green and black version of All Might's Golden Age costume. You can get a better idea of what it looks like if you've played My Hero 1's Justice, as it is an All Might skin. Second, Bakuhatsu no Kami is Japanese for God of Explosions, which is currently Bakugo's preferred hero, villain name. Third, thank you to Lauren Leclerc for the line "You'll rue the day you bested me." The minute Aizawa announced the trip, Izuku became tense. The USJ. This was one thing about his future that he had thought about a lot, mainly over whether or not he should prevent it or just change a few things about it. In the end though, Toshi-sensei had been right. The USJ incident had made Wano stronger and prepared them for the chaos that ensued, so he didn't even try to make sure All Might used less time today. However, there was no way he'd risked Sue's life, or Aizawa-sensei like last time, not with his increased control of One for All. The worst part though was the thought that maybe All for One and Chimera had caused the multiple incidents that caused All Might to use up his time. Really, how long had All for One been working on this plot? But the stressful part wouldn't begin until later. Right now, he was excited to actually go through it in his costume, even if that was a small matter in the grand scheme of things. What wasn't so small was Tsu. Your quirk, isn't it a lot like All Might's? Everyone leaned in closer to hear Izuku's answer. Fortunately, he had prepared for this, though he had forgotten it had happened so soon. Well, that would be nice, and I do happen to have the same quirk as someone at Might Tower. But his name is Yagi Toshinori, and he helped train my quirk last year. Izuku then grabbed his phone and pulled up a picture. So, unless you think this guy is All Might, then no, I don't have All Might's quirk. Everyone stared in shock at the picture, but only Bakugo said something. That's your sensei. He looks more like a fucking skeleton. That's from when I met him, before he started training me. He had a bad injury about 5 years ago and lost his stomach and I think his will to live. But apparently training me and meeting Mom helped out. Kaken laughed. Yeah, I'm sure Auntie Inko helped with that. She is one fine cook. All Might's quirk or not, must be nice to have such a flashy quirk, Kirishima stated. My hardening is super strong and can stop bad guys, but it doesn't look like much. Trust me, Kirishima, you've got what it takes to be a pro, Izuku replied, remembering what he had heard of the redhead's time with Fat Gum. Hey, have you ever seen how hard you can get? Not yet, but are you sure I could be a pro? I'm sure it would be easier if I had a flashier quirk. Kirishima, I've been studying heroes for years. Trust me, you can be a fantastic pro. Kirishima then claimed that the 3 obvious high-ranking heroes in their class would be Izuku, Kaken, and Shoto, though Tsu claimed that Kaken's temper would be a problem. Please, Izuku started. If attitude was a problem, then Endeavor wouldn't be our number 2. Kaken just has an ego and temper problem. Endeavor is a piece of shit. Everyone stared in shock before Sato said, Are you sure you want to say that with Endeavor's favorite son right there? Shoto simply smirked and said, I think I might actually come to like you, Midoriya. Naturally, that was when Aizawa announced that they had arrived. 13 once again managed to inspire the class with their speech on rescue training after informing Aizawa about All Might's situation. Suddenly, a surge of electricity went over the lights, and Izuku quickly turned to Kaminari. Please tell me that was you, he asked, making sure to act like this was all new to him. Sorry, but no, I couldn't do something like that if I tried. Then try to get in touch with the rest of the school. Try anyone so long as they aren't here. Right on schedule, Kurogiri arrived, allowing the League of Villains to enter the USJ, and Aizawa was quick to identify them as villains. Shoto, as before, was quick to analyze the situation, recognizing the problem of someone jamming the alarms and that they were smart at choosing such an isolated location. Midoriya, I told you to stay back, Aizawa stated as Izuku leaned forward, observing the villains to make sure nothing had changed there. Sorry, Sensei, but this is going to be our job too, and I doubt you'll be able to stop all of them. But good luck, Aizawa-sensei. You can't be a pro if you rely on luck, but thanks for the sentiment. Aizawa then charged at the villains, taking almost a dozen in no more than a minute. Midoriya stayed and made several new mental notes for the future before Ida once again pulled him away. Okay, Ida, I have some orders for you as class rep, Izuku said as Kurogiri arrived and started his monologue. Yes, Ida asked, showing the utmost respect for the title at least, just as Izuku had hoped and expected. You're one of the fastest in the class. Use that speed and escape so that you can let others know. Principal Nezu, All Might, Toshinori-sensei, anyone. By now, Kaken and Kirishima had attacked Kurogiri. He needed to hurry. But I can't abandon my classmates. You're not abandoning us. You are going to get hope and help, Izuku explained. Sometimes that's what you need to do as a pro. You know, you really shouldn't discuss your plans in front of a villain, Kurogiri stated. It makes it too easy for us to disrupt your plans. Now, let's make things interesting. Immediately, he descended and scattered those that he could, including Izuku, who was glad to see he ended up back in the shipwreck zone. If he had ended up somewhere else, then he'd have started worrying that he had caused some horrible ripple effect, but this gave him hope. Even better was when he saw Tsu and Minta with him. Once they were on the boat, Izuku once again explained how the villains had probably acquired their schedule, while Tsu started talking about how things could go horribly wrong. It doesn't matter if they have a plan or not. We're heroes in training, aren't we? Those are villains, and it's our job to stop them. Let's show them that we aren't afraid, that we are here to stand in their way. Izuku finished with a smile similar to All Might's. Now, I've got the start of a plan. I just need to know how your quirks work to finish it. Once they had explained, Izuku quickly explained his plan. When the others were ready, Izuku got on the railing of the ship before jumping up and sending a Texas smash into the water, allowing Minta's balls to capture the villains while Tsu helped them escape the shipwreck flood zone. So, now what? Tsu asked. The two of you are going to rejoin the others at the entrance. Tsu, if you can, jump over the plaza so Minta can toss some balls to keep the villains here. If it's not safe for you to do that, then just get back to 13. But what about you, Ribbit? I'm going to go check on Aizawa-sensei. And it's going to be even more dangerous there than it had been on the boat. Now get going. Tsu and Minto were quick to agree. And Izuku arrived just as Aizawa started fighting Shigaraki and watched as the skin of his elbow disintegrated. As soon as the Namu started to move towards him, Izuku jumped into the air. Stay away from my sensei. Manchester smash, he yelled as he sent an armored kick right into the creature's exposed brain. The creature collapsed as it whimpered in pain, allowing Izuku to save Aizawa from having his skull crushed again. With that done, Izuku grabbed Aizawa and rushed him to the staging area. Midoriya, what are you doing? He asked. Saving you, sensei. Now stay here and watch over the others. I have work to do. Midoriya, protecting you is. But Izuku was already gone. The first thing he had done after he decided to let the USJ happen was decide on a plan to help with the Namu. Even with full infusion, he knew he wasn't fast, strong, or tough enough to take it head on. Not without All Might to help him, like the fight against Wolfram. That attack of yours is pretty powerful. And it's a smash on top of that. Are you one of All Might's disciples? You have no idea, Izuku replied. And you aren't going to kill him. Not if I have anything to say about it. Kansas smash. With that, he charged at the Namu, delivered a punch, then bounced back before the Namu could react. Then he did it again and again, faster and faster, until all Shigaraki could see was a green blur. The Namu tried multiple times to grab him, but it was just a little too slow to catch him. That's not going to work. Namu has a shock absorption quirk. So what? Izuku asked. Not slowing down at all. Every shock absorber has its limits. That was when Kirigiri arrived. Shigaraki Tamura, 13 is out of action, but there were students I was unable to disperse and one of them escaped. Shigaraki groaned at that. Then it's game over for us. If you weren't a warp gate, I'd turn you into dust. We can't win against dozens of pros. Recover Namu. Kirigiri attempted to do so only to realize the wind pressure. I can't get close enough to either of them. Then the doors to the USJ were smashed open and from the dust came the one person everyone wanted to see then. All Might. Have no fear, students, I am here. Within seconds, he had defeated the remaining thugs and was next to Izuku. Young Midoriya, go back to the entrance with the others. Wait, you need to know, that creature has a shock absorption quirk. I must have hit him 400 times and he barely moved. All Might nodded, then looked at him and smiled before moving against the Namu. Izuku backed up, but only to the base of the stairs so he could keep a close eye on what was going on, and so he could jump in if necessary. Toshinori-sensei may have managed to increase his limit thanks to Izuku's mom, but he was still pushing things today. The worst part was that All Might was making the same moves as before, which resulted in him being caught by the Namu while Kirigiri opened a warp gate. Damn you, you warp gate bastard. Let him go. However, before he could even get close enough for Kirigiri to open another warp gate, Kaken arrived and blasted him while Shoto froze the Namu and Kirishima went after Shigaraki. Kaken once again threatened the mist villain, but it once again set Shigaraki off, and he ordered the Namu to free itself. Shoto, Kirishima, protect Kaken. Kaken, get moving, and make sure Kirigiri goes with you, Izuku ordered as the Namu regenerated. I don't need to be protected, Deku. Kaken complained, but he did as Izuku asked. The others also moved to defend the explosion user, only for the Namu to try and attack them and be intercepted by All Might. They clashed with such force that everyone was blown back by the wind. Unfortunately, that also resulted in Kaken being blown off Kirigiri as the two fighters moved so fast it looked like they had a dozen arms each. And while he may have been imagining it, Izuku was fairly certain it took All Might less time and blows to hit the Namu hard enough to make it pull a team rocket. Then All Might said something surprising. I really have gotten weaker. Back in my prime, 2 hits would have been enough to finish him off. But today it took more than 100 mighty blows. Wait, what? Izuku had been pushing himself, hitting the Namu at 25% of his own power. And at 400 blows, that should have only taken off half as many hits. How much stronger was he going to be? Then the steam started pouring off All Might, and the fear came back. Yeah, he trusted these 3 most of any other potential trio in the class, but it was All Might's secret, not his own. It should be up to All Might to tell them himself, not let it get exposed like this, not again. Hey, Tamura, how upset do you think your boss will be when he learns you lost that Namu? How much time and effort did you just waste? That's it. Kirigiri, take All Might. I'm going for that brat. The 2 future archenemies charged at each other. Izuku sending a kick at the decay user, only for Shigaraki to catch his leg. Snipe managed to save him, but he still lost a good amount of skin to the villain, and from then, things continued as before. At evening, Tsukachi Naomasa was just about to dismiss the students when he noticed one of the names on his list. Todoroki Shoto. Any relation to Todoroki Enji? Shoto looked up in confusion. He's my father. Why? You don't look like one of the officers he works with, nor do I know anything about any of his cases. Tsukachi just smiled. I've never worked with your father. Actually, I'm assigned to All Might, but your father is involved in a case I'm working. I need to speak to you in private. Wait, before you do, will you tell us how Aizawa-sensei is doing? Ashido asked, as their teacher had collapsed soon after Midoriya dropped him off. And what about 13, Midoriya and All Might? Uraraka added. Tsukachi had to think for a moment before realizing who Midoriya was. They're all doing fine. Aizawa just collapsed out of pain and exhaustion. His arm is bandaged, and Recovery Girl will be healing him in the morning. 13 took some bad lacerations to the back, but they'll be back to normal in no time. All Might and Midoriya are also without serious injury. In fact, Midoriya will almost certainly be walking home on his own power tonight. Everyone, including Shoto, sighed a breath of relief at hearing that. But Shoto walked off with the detective and the others headed back. A few minutes later in the nurse's office, Toshinori's reaction to Tsukachi's statement reminded Izuku why he let things continue mostly unchanged. The students also risked their lives and they fought as hard as us. Has there ever been a class of students who experienced the world of pros so early in their training? I can't think of one. More, they not only survived, but they also learned what it takes to be a pro. Those villains made a mistake in attacking them. This class is strong, and such a challenge will only strengthen them further. They're filled with courage and drive. Mark my words, they're going to become great heroes, and it will be a great honor helping them become so. Izuku smiled, not because of the praise, but knowing that his sensei was right, and knowing that he had made the right choice. His classmates would need that strength to face what was coming. And I will admit, I had no plan whatsoever when I wrote Izuku asking Shoto and Kirishima to defend Kaken. After 2 days of trying to solve it, I decided, screw it, I'll just skip that whole discussion and jump to the best scene in the season. As for why Aizawa didn't intervene again, let's be honest, the only reason he stayed awake as long as he did in canon is adrenaline and the pain. Once the adrenaline faded, he almost certainly would have crashed even if he had come out unscathed, especially since it seems like he keeps up with his hero work while also working at UA. As the staff meeting about the USJ incident wound down, Tsukachi spoke up once more. There's something else I need to bring to your attention. And then he set down a strange, red bullet with a needle at the tip. What's that? Snipe asked. I've never seen a bullet like that before. That's because this one is specially made by a Yakuza group called Shai Hasekai, and it's infused with a quirk-destroying drug. It's only a temporary effect right now, but who knows what the future holds. Most of the UA staff were horrified upon learning what the bullet could do. Toshinori, on the other hand, was quite pleased. So, you found it. That's great, Tsukachi. I don't suppose you managed to find the source of the drug, or take down Shai Hasekai. No, we haven't done that yet, All Might, Tsukachi stated. But there's a reason for that. We only just discovered the bullets 2 days ago. What's more is that only the Shai Hasekai Oyabun and Kumicho have them, and only sparingly at that. Moreover, they only received them within the last week. Nimuri Kayama raised an eyebrow at that, and the shocked look in Toshinori's eyes. I assume there's a significance to that, she asked. All Might told me about this drug more than 6 weeks ago, and he said that he learned about it from rumors. I need to know the truth. All Might, how do you know of this drug? Toshinori was torn. He didn't want to lie to his old friend, but how could he sell Izuku out without at least hearing his side of the story? And how did he know in the first place anyways? I learned about it from someone else, Tsukachi, but I need to speak to them before telling you anything more. And how long will that be? I intended to speak to them tomorrow, so you should have your answers soon. The next day things happened basically the same as before, from Aizawa announcing the sports festival to Uraraka's intensity surrounding the announcement and subsequent explanation of her backstory. However, since Toshinori's existence had been explained, there was no embarrassing invitation to the lunch date as Uraraka had been fond of calling it. Toshinori just showed up and asked Izuku to his office. Let me guess, you want me to use the sports festival as my debut, to say I am here? To the world, right? Izuku asked once they had arrived. Toshinori laughed at that. Boy, we are on the same wavelength. Yes, I did want to talk about that, especially since I'm down to 2 hours at most, even with your mother's wonderful cooking. That Namu was a real tough customer, and it hurt a lot. Don't worry, I already have a plan for that, Izuku said with a smile. Even the first time, he was sure that he had made quite the impression due to his fight with Shoto. No one in the history of the sports festival had so utterly destroyed the arena before, let alone in one attack. He had checked. Good, then that's one problem dealt with, especially since I don't have much time left as the symbol of peace, and villains are starting to notice that. Less time than even you think, Sensei, Izuku thought, a frown growing on his face. There are only 4 months left until his rematch with All For One, assuming things went the same as before. But there is something else that Tsukachi brought up with me yesterday, Toshinori said. How did you know about Rewind 6 weeks ago? What do you mean? Toshinori quickly explained what Tsukachi had told the UA staff, and Izuku started cursing internally. Damn, he hadn't expected Overhaul to play Rewind so close to the chest. Had it really taken him 6 months to start distributing it as wide as Kirishima had reported? Or was he just playing it safe with All for One still at large and starting to move again? Wait, why does he want to know? I think he wouldn't be surprised if you had some connections to the Yakuza. Izuku laughed at that. Me and the Yakuza? Not a chance. But tell him I'm willing to tell him the whole truth, but it has to be in person, and it has to be after the sports festival. Oh, why's that? Because of what the truth is and why I haven't said anything about it yet to anyone. I'm not sure he or you would believe it without his quirk. Oh, and I was kind of hoping to tell 2 people the truth about one for all at the same time, if you don't mind. 2 people? Toshinori asked. He leaned back against the couch and looked towards the ceiling, considering the possibilities. If I had to guess, I'd have to say that young Bakugo is one of them. Yeah, we've known each other all our lives, and he's not accepting our cover story at all. He's been asking questions since Aizawa-sensei's test. And the second would have to be either young Ada or Uraraka, am I right? Izuku smiled at that. No, while I'd trust them with our secret, they aren't asking questions. But I'm certain that if Shoto isn't asking questions yet, he soon will be. I'm also certain that I would trust him with my life. You're planning on telling them after the festival, right? Well then, in that case I have some time to think on it. Everyone focused on training for the sports festival for the next 2 weeks, and when they had their Hero 101 classes, Izuku did his best to give ideas to his classmate. From hinting at Unbreakable to Kirishima to suggesting Shoto could form weapons with his ice to helping Momo better deal with more offensive quirks to helping both Momo and Shoto work on their physical fighting skills. When Jiro asked why he was helping them when they were going to be competition soon, he had an answer prepared. First, you chose me as class president, and I think it's my duty to ensure we are all at our absolute best during the festival. Second, we're classmates, and everyone is gunning for us after the USJ and Kaken's gauntlet throw, so we all need to be at our best. Third, I'm honestly hoping that we all make an impression on everyone watching. During the final week of April, Wano was deemed mentally recovered enough to return to the USJ and make up their rescue training. Uraraka, Jiru and Ashido excelled at the earthquake zone, Minta and Tsu excelled in the shipwreck zone, and to everyone's shock, Kaken proved exceptional in the fire zones, using his explosions to put the fires out. A little something I figured out after I realized why they sent the shrinks to meet with us. If you take away the oxygen in the air, the fire dies. I've been working on an explosion that's more flash than fire specifically for this, he explained when he saw the dumbfounded looks on their faces. He was given extra points for creativity as a result. Since the opportunity was there, Izuku decided to ask a question. If we come across an obvious case of abuse, and the abuser tries to take their victim back, what are we supposed to do? All Might and Aizawa turned to face each other, surprised at the question. We are mandatory reporters, so if we see such a case, then we are not only supposed to report it, but we are also legally obligated to protect the abused person and take them to a hospital, no matter the circumstances, Aizawa answered. You shouldn't deal with too many situations. But that is part of the reason the government started licensing heroes, All Might continued. In all my time as a hero, both here and in America, I think I've had to deal with such situations 5 times. So don't worry about it too much, young Midoriya. After they had finished and changed back into their uniforms, Izuku stopped Momo and Jiru. Could I get your help with the lockers? The girls stared at him in confusion. What kind of help? Jiru demanded. The kind that will deal with potential problems involving Minta, Izuku replied. Come on, we all know the staple of a peephole in the lockers. So I think we can take the time to find any that exist. The 2 of you will look for holes in the wall. If you do, Jiru will guide me to where they are, and I can see if they go all the way through. If they do, then Momo can seal them. The girls were shocked at that, but quickly agreed. That night, Izuku had become very thoughtful. Shoto had become quiet since the USJ, even more so than usual, and he always looked like he was thinking about something painful. But that almost didn't seem like the right word for the look on his friend's face. Had he been like that the first time around? Izuku couldn't remember, as they had only gotten close after Shoto's challenge to him right before the festival actually started. He had left the other boy alone partly in hopes he'd be able to deal with it on his own, and partly because Izuku knew that Shoto didn't feel like they were friends yet, and butting in on this problem might just push him away, which was the last thing Izuku wanted to do. Well, hopefully Shoto would be willing to speak about it during the festival when the other boy spoke to him about his own tragic backstory. With that thought in mind, he went to sleep. Izuku would have gasped in astonishment if he could. He found himself on a snowy plain with 8 other people there, including Toshi-sensei. He would have spoken, but when he looked down, all he could see was his hand and a staticky outline. Hold on, kid, let me help, Toshinori said. With that, he cupped Izuku's head in his hands before taking him in for a hug. Thank you, my boy, for what you're doing. Toshi-sensei, what's going on? Well, there's a bit of an argument about whether or not you deserve one for all considering what happened with young Eri and your actions since then, he explained. Wait, you know about that? Izuku exclaimed. Only this version of me, the part of me that imprinted on one for all, and that's because we have access to your mind, as you may remember from your first sports festival. So, you did help me break Shinso's control, Izuku whispered. Then the important part sank in. Wait, what do you mean, argument? What would happen if I lost the argument? You would lose one for all and my power would return to Toshinori to be passed on to someone more worthy. A new voice said, Young Midoriya, allow me to introduce to you Shigaraki Yoichi, the younger brother of All for One, first wielder of One for All, and your main detractor. What do you have against me? The Greenette asked. Your manipulation of time and subsequent manipulation of the eighth wielder of One for All. Not to mention the fact that you did not warn anyone of the villain attack on your fellow students. And we have all seen his memories. We know why he did all that, Shimura Nana argued. Yet if he had said something, 2 of All for One's most powerful disciples would have been caught and his plans thwarted for a time, said a man with short, spiky hair and a large scar across his face. How can any of you support him when he practically stole the quirk? Another man asked. He's no better than All for One. No, he's worse because he managed to do what All for One never could. Enough, came the cry from a fourth individual, this one with 2 cracks over his left eye that came down to his lip. Toshinori chose this young man of his own free will and all he has done so far is act so that he has an easier time adjusting to it. My own quirk would have told us if he was a threat, and I tell you not only is he not a threat, but I will actively support him. With that, he turned to Izuku and linked their arms. Young man, I believe in you, and if you haven't figured out my act of support by the end of your sports festival, I will speak to you alone the next time you sleep. With that, Izuku woke with a start and saw One for All active in the arm that the vestige had grabbed. Due to the nature of the sports festival, it was actually a 3-day event covering the first weekend that was fully in May, from Friday to Sunday. Class 1's events were held in the morning of the first 2 days. Class 2 had the afternoon and Class 3 took the entirety of the 3rd day so that the pros could take a look at everyone competing and family didn't have to worry about missing something if they had multiple relatives in different classes. In addition, the first 2 events for classes 1 and 2 were held on the first day while the second day was saved for the tournament. Following each competition was when that year's business and support classes had their chance to shine, working together to sell new support items, or simply selling merchandise from the usual food products to hero memorabilia, including memorabilia of the older students. Wano was waiting in their communal locker, mentally preparing themselves for the challenges ahead when Bakugo turned to Izuku. Hey, Deku, I'm going all out this time, and you're going down. Bring it on, Kaken, Izuku replied with a smile. Yeah, that was probably an official challenge, but it was Kaken, and they'd been challenging each other for years now, he was used to it. Midoriya. And now Shoto came for his challenge. Everyone knew this was going to be important, even if only Izuku and Shoto knew why, and only Izuku knew how important. Looking at things objectively, I think I'm stronger than you. However, you have caught All Might's eye and he's been helping you. I'm not going to pry into that, but know that I will beat you. Izuku nodded. Todoroki, of everyone in our class, you are the one person that I think could defeat me. I also understand why you challenged me, but I'm going to make you a promise. I'm aiming for the top as well, and I'll go for it with everything I have, and even if you do beat me, I promise you're going to have to throw everything you have against me if you want to beat me. With that, they walked out to the arena, with Present Mike talking them up during their introduction. Midnight was once again taking the stage as the referee. And once again Izuku was surprised that his only thought was asking if it was appropriate for her to be there with the youngest class. Why wasn't he at least physically interested in her? Representing our first years as our highest-ranked student in the entrance exam, Class A's President Midoriya Izuku. None were more surprised than Izuku. He'd beaten Kaken's score. Then he remembered the extra bots he had destroyed and realized that, yes, he had. With that, he stepped up to the podium and pledged, my oath is simple. By the end of this festival, you will know who we are and that we are here. He stepped down to silence. No one knew just how to react to his pledge. Midnight then announced the first task, and as Izuku had hoped, it was the obstacle course race. Everyone gathered towards the doors, and when the countdown finished, Class 1 charged in except for Midoriya himself. No one noticed him just standing there except for Midnight herself. Don't you want to win? She asked with her normal voice. Of course, but I also know my classmates, Izuku explained. There's going to be a golden opportunity. And that's when I'll make my move. Just then there was an enormous blast of ice through the door. That's my cue. See you at the finish line, he called as he charged through the door and bounced from wall to wall, using his speed and maneuverability to his advantage while also avoiding Shoto's eyes. When he arrived at the Robo Inferno, he drilled straight through the scored villains before delivering a kick strong enough to knock down its zero-pointer while also tearing a piece of its armor loose. Soon he had caught up to Shoto and Kaken. Hey guys, how are things going? Deku, what the hell are you doing? Why aren't you using your quirk? the blonde demanded. Because it's more fun this way, Izuku replied, getting a smile from his friends. Speaking of which, you get why it's set up this way, right? Obviously, Shoto said. The corridor represents how hard it is to get into the hero life in the first place. The robots are villains that we must defeat in order to prove ourselves true heroes. This entire race represents the fight for the recognition as the #1 hero. And that, he continued, stopping at a cliff ledge, represents the numerous pitfalls we face, and how tight a rope we must walk in order to both win and keep the public confidence. With that, he leapt onto one of the ropes and slid across it. Izuku just smiled and leapt from stack to stack, having the time of his life. It was nice to be able to use one for all for something that was purely there for fun. Unfortunately, he made a few mistakes at the fall, resulting in him falling behind. Oh well, that just meant he could use his explosive plan from his first life again. Sure, it didn't fit the symbolism of the minefield, but the symbolism wasn't important now, winning was. So once again, he used the explosions to propel himself forward and used Shoto and Kaken as literal stepping stones into first place and charged forward. I don't believe it. Midoriya Izuku, the last to start is the first to cross the finish line. Present Mike cried out. As soon as he heard that, Izuku stopped and raised his fist in victory, causing everyone to cheer the results. Once everyone had crossed midnight declared the next phase of the festival, and Izuku looked over the field, hoping the people he chose would be willing to join him. And yes, I know that canon suggests that the entire festival covers only a day, but that makes no sense whatsoever. Where are the other classes showing off their talents and how they've grown over the previous year? And if they are taking place at the same time, how is everyone going to be scouted? The pros would have to choose a single year to scout out, which then hurts the other 2 years. So no, a 3-day event makes more sense. Each class getting a full day probably makes more sense. But I wanted to give the 2 younger years a chance to rest before doing their one-on-one fights. When Izuku thought about the cavalry battle, he had planned to use it as a chance to build a stronger relationship between the 2 hero courses. Unfortunately, things didn't work out the way he had hoped. Monoma didn't believe him when he said that Shinso was planning on replacing someone in the hero course and left him to talk to Shinso in order to get his side of the story, which immediately resulted in Monoma being brainwashed into joining Shinso's team. As a result, no one from Class B wanted to work with him and he decided to stick with his original team as a result. The cavalry battle basically didn't change at all, with a few exceptions. First, due to Dark Shadow's weakness to light, Izuku refused to let it take on Kaken's explosions and Izuku threw him back with a Delaware smash. Naturally, Zero managed to catch Kaken every time. Second, he had Dark Shadow grab as many headbands as it could after Kaminari's indiscriminate shock immobilized their rivals. Third, since he was expecting Reciproburst, he managed to guide his team to dodge it, resulting in them holding onto their 10 million starting points. When it came to points though, in the end, while Izuku's team remained in first, the lineup remained the same. That's it for the cavalry battle. Midnight declared. Tomorrow, the finals will begin with one-on-one battles. Now, let's see who's up. Wait, Anjiro called out. I wish to drop out. As before, people tried to talk him out of it, but Anjiro stood firm. Then to everyone's shock, Monoma also dropped out, giving the same reason Anjiro had, which resulted in the exact same roster for the start that there had been in Izuku's first life. What are the odds? Or is this just the universe playing a joke on me? When the matches were set though, Izuku just stared in shock. Kirishima Injiro vs Tetsu. Shizaki Ibara vs Ishido Mina. Uraraka Ochako vs Hatsume Mei. Todoroki Shoto vs Zero Hanta. Yaoyorozu Momo vs Ida Tenya. Takoyami Fumikage vs Aoyama. Kaminari Denki vs Bakugo Katsuki. Midoriya Izuku vs Shinso Hitoshi. Almost half the fights are the same. That's surprising, both at how many and how few, Izuku thought. And when will I fight Shoto? Him, not until the semi-final. But before he could think of anything else, Shoto pulled him aside. This time, he stood and waited for Shoto to speak, rather than try and start a conversation. Knowing what he wanted to talk about was both a relief and a burden. It was a relief because now Izuku had no concerns about what he was about to hear. But it was a burden because all Izuku had wanted to do for the last 3 weeks was to help Shoto deal with his issues. But even after this conversation, it was simply not the right time. Then Shoto asked the big question, Midoriya, tell me, are you All Might's secret love child or something? Even though he had been expecting it, it was still shocking to see how poor Shoto's social skills were. For a moment, Izuku just stood there before finally bursting out in laughter. Wow, I figured you were going somewhere, but that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Trust me, I would have found out if I was related to All Might in some way by now. But there is a connection, isn't there? One that you're not supposed to talk about. Izuku nodded at that. I'm sure you know that my father has been stuck at the number 2 spot for quite some time now, but he's ambitious, he aims for the top. He used his overwhelming power to make a name for himself, but he was never able to top All Might the living legend, and it's made him bitter as a result. When he realized he could never beat All Might himself, he moved on to his next plan. A stupid Quirk marriage, right? Shoto looked shocked at the guess. It's the only thing that makes sense considering your quirk. And your dad's obvious weakness. Obvious weakness? Shoto asked in shock. Since when was his old man's weakness obvious? Yeah, those with fire quirks tend to overheat. The more powerful the quirk, the quicker they overheat, and he has the most powerful fire quirk on record. So all one really needs to do to beat him is avoid his attacks until he can't use his quirk any longer. So, he went with someone who has an ice quirk, and since their natural weakness is their body temperature dropping to a point where they risk hypothermia or frostbite, hypothetically the two powers would balance each other out. And with him being who he is, he had the money and power to secure a quirk marriage with anyone he wanted, right? For a brief moment, Shoto smiled at Izuku. You truly are brilliant, Midoriya. He considers me his ultimate creation and intends for me to replace All Might. His drive and mad ambition are so overwhelming, he broke my mother. In all of my memories of her, she's crying. By the end, she so despised my father that she considered my left side unsightly and poured boiling water on my face. Worse, I recently learned that my father's been using his wealth to keep her in the hospital and keep us away from her, even though the doctors need one of us to check on her progress. I hate him, and I challenged you to show him that I can win without using his damned fire quirk. Izuku raised an eyebrow, as that reminded him of an interview All Might had given years ago. But which one? He'd need to talk to Toshi-sensei to get a reminder. Also, that was what had happened after USJ. Wow, that explained a lot. Shoto started walking away at that, but Izuku called out to him. Wait, I have a question first. What do you want to know? Izuku briefly hesitated before responding. You don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable, but what really happened to Taoya? Shoto turned around in shock. How do you even know about him? Shoto, as much of an ass as your dad is, he's still the number 2 hero, and things like Taoya going missing was going to hit the news. So, what happened? Izuku had his own theory, but he had to talk to a certain burned villain first. The bi-colored teen sighed in response to the question. I wish I knew. All I know is that he often trained alone and one day he just didn't come back. There was a horrible fire the night he left, and no one found so much as a trace of him. Fortunately, Izuku had planned to meet with Toshinori after the first day in order to go over the results. Once they had done so, Izuku brought up Shoto. We definitely need to tell Shoto soon, he started. Oh, why's that? Because of what he asked me today once we were alone. Toshinori raised an eyebrow. Why was Izuku being so evasive? He wasn't usually like this. And what did he ask? He questioned while picking up his cup of tea. Izuku waited until his mentor was taking a drink and answered. He asked if I was your secret love child or something. Tea and blood shot out of Toshinori's mouth at the answer. He said what? He demanded, the blood still flowing. Please tell me he wasn't serious, the blonde asked once the blood had stopped. Well, he asked with a completely straight face. So yeah, he was serious. And you're certain he can be trusted? Absolutely, Izuku responded, thinking of all the times Shoto had been there for him. Oh, and I was wondering, didn't you say something in an interview about inherited quirks? Do you remember which one? Heh, just when I start to forget how much of a fanboy you are, you pull something like this. Yeah, I talked about inherited quirks once. You couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 at the time though. Why? Because Shoto's having problems with his dad, and it's causing him to reject his fire side. Somehow, I've got to get through to him. I'm just trying to figure out how. Unfortunately, he didn't really have the option of breaking himself to win Shoto over. Together, he and Toshi worked to try and figure out how to help him, but nothing they could think of would certainly work, so they split up for the day. But before Izuku went off on his own, he caught up with Momo and Uraraka and warned them about Mainta and Kaminari's cheerleader plan. With any luck, there would be no embarrassment for one of this time around. The next morning, Izuku stopped by the tech room and asked, is it ready? Yeah, though I don't see the use of something like this, Matsumoto-sana replied. All it does is electrocute you if your heart rate drops too low. I don't think your heart rate is going to drop much during the sports festival. Izuku just smiled in response. You know, you could have had this sooner if you had talked to me. She's much better at this than everyone else in the support course. Yeah, but she's terrifying when it comes to her babies, and I prefer someone a little more sane than her. Heh, I can't blame you for that, Matsumoto replied. Good luck with the finals today. Izuku thanked him and walked off to the stadium to deal with Shinso. Much to his surprise though, he wasn't first on the list. It was Ashido and Shizaki, which ended fairly quickly with a victory for Ashido as her acid melted Shizaki's minds. It wasn't even the second fight. That was given to one of the fights he honestly couldn't even begin to calculate the odds of who would win, Mei versus Uraraka. The fight started much how Mei's fight with Ida had, with Mei avoiding Uraraka while advertising her babies. For the first minute or two, Izuku worried that the whole thing would end up a repeat of Ida's fight with her in his first life, but he underestimated Uraraka. What, are you going to just be a walking advertisement for your poor little babies? I'm betting you don't even think they could stand up in a real fight. No one could miss Mei's reaction to that. Her rage was so strong and palpable that one could almost see the flames surrounding the young inventor. Alright, you little bitch, now you're going to pay. With that, Mei charged at Uraraka using the jetpack that had caught Izuku's eye. However, that was exactly what Uraraka had wanted the inventor to do, as it allowed her to grab the other girl, activate her quirk, and send Mei flying out of the stadium. The next match was Shoto vs. Zero, and that went as before, including the use of the heaven-piercing ice wall. After that was Kirishima vs. Tetsu. And for a while it looked like it would go the same way as before, but then Izuku noticed something. Kirishima didn't look as tired as Tetsu did. I guess all that stamina work paid off, he thought as Kirishima took the victory and made a new friend. Momo and Ado were next, and though Momo put up a good fight, Ida's speed won the fight for him. Takoyami vs. Aoyama went even faster than Ashido's fight with Aoyama the first time around, as Dark Shadow easily avoided Aoyama's laser and cut the belt in less than 30 seconds. Then Kaken went up against Kaminari, who actually tried something smart. Kaminari attempted to use his million-volt attack as an instant win, but as smart as that was, Kaken was smarter, and he used his explosions to create a rock barrier to intercept the electricity. After that, it was easy. Not bad, Pikachu, but you can't be much of a hero if you knock yourself out with one attack. Well, you're too good for anything else to work, Bakugo. I gambled with my best attack and failed. You really are too good. Finally, it was time, and Izuku had to wonder what had changed. Why was he the last person in the first round rather than the first? It doesn't matter. What did matter was that he was prepared to deal with Hitoshi Shinso this time, and all he needed to do was talk and hope he listens. It started off like normal, with Shinso insulting Ajiro and Izuku responding to defend his classmate, resulting in Shinso gaining control of Izuku. However, that was when Matsumoto's device kicked in, shocking Izuku out of the trance. You're going to have to try harder than that if you want to beat me, Shinso. How did you do that? The lavender-haired boy asked. I requested the use of a single piece of support equipment. Here, he raised his arm, revealing what looked like a watch. This item shocks me if my heart rate gets too low. No one expects a low heart rate during the sports festival unless they face a quirk that could cause that, such as your brainwashing. You bastard. My quirk leaves me at a huge disadvantage. But I've always wanted to be a hero. Why should I be denied the chance because of unhappy fate? You were born with the perfect quirk, while mine was always denigrated as a villain's quirk. Perfect quirk? Izuku asked, rage clear in his eyes. Midnight, can you pause the fight long enough for Aizawa-sensei to come down? I'm not having him erase Shinso's quirk. That's unfair to you, she said, cutting him off. I don't want him to erase Shinso's quirk. I want him to erase mine. Everyone in the audience gasped at that, shocked to hear anyone say that they wanted to win a fight quirkless. Unconventional, but I like it. The match will be paused long enough to grant Midoriya's request. While Aizawa descended from his booth, Midoriya turned to Shinso. You think my quirk is perfect? You have no idea what kind of hell I've gone through to get this far. 2 years ago, I would have traded places with you in an instant. What? Why would you want a villain's quirk? Because you knew what your quirk was. Mine was hidden so well that I went through hell as a result. I was bullied throughout school as weak, defenseless, useless, worthless, quirkless Deku. Once again, the audience was left speechless at that. One of the more promising students in Class 1 was thought to be quirkless. I was constantly told to kill myself from the time I turned 5 until I made it to UA. One classmate told me that the only way for me to be a hero was for me to jump off the roof and pray I was born with a quirk in my next life. Do you have any idea what I would have done to have your quirk? But you have a quirk now, what changed? Shinso asked. I got lucky, and someone from Might Tower recognized that I had a power accumulation quirk. If it weren't for that, I would still think I was quirkless. Shinso, your quirk is the greatest quirk I've ever heard of, not as a villain's quirk, but for hero work. Villains are known for being talkative, and your quirk can stop them in their tracks. That was when Aizawa showed up. Good. Now, Aizawa-sensei, before we start up again, could you look at Shinso with your quirk and then immediately blink? We're going to fight fair, and then I'm going to show Shinso just how hard I've worked to get here. Aizawa did as he asked, and when Midnight finished her countdown and ordered the fight to be resumed, Shinso didn't even get a chance to say one thing before Izuku swept his legs out from under him, then broke his arms and legs in one hit each. Do you yield? Shinso was quick to agree. And at Izuku's proposal, Midnight knocked him out with her pheromones while he carried the boy to Recovery Girl. When Shinso woke up 15 minutes later and was told what Izuku did, he found the boy and asked, why did you do that? Help me after you made it impossible for me to continue. A couple reasons. First is that you didn't deserve to suffer just because you made some assumptions about me, especially since I lost my temper over it. You did, but you barely did anything. Only because Aizawa-sensei had erased my quirk, and I had a couple minutes to cool off. Even then, with my quirk, I could have killed you easily. Super strength, especially at my level, isn't as great as most people think it is, and it can be just as villainous as your own quirk. My second reason is because I meant every word I said out there. You can be a hero, and I would love it if you joined the hero course. I even know the perfect person you could replace. Shinso started laughing, and Izuku joined him, happy to learn that his temper hadn't ruined things between them. When he returned to the stadium, Kaken was helping Uraraka walk out. I guess you two were first in the quarterfinals. Yeah, we were. Had to yell at the extras in the stadium though. They called me a villain because I wouldn't take it easy on her. Izuku smiled at him as he took Uraraka's other arm. They clearly don't know you then. You only go easy on people if you don't respect them. Yeah, I respect her too much to go easy on her. All our classmates, really. They had reached Recovery Girl's office by now and dropped Uraraka off. You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd have said you helped her with her strategy, Deku. She was that good. Any better and she would have won. Round cheeks is better than I thought she was. Oh, and you're up next going against shitty hair. He stopped for a minute then asked, do you want me to stop calling you Deku? Izuku stared at his friend, utterly confused. Why would I want you to do that? Because of what you said during your fight. I was a complete jerk to you when we were kids. And even after we started sparring, I was still a jerk to you. I don't want things going bad between us now that we're really starting to get close again. Kaken, I know you don't really mean anything when you call me Deku. Yeah, it's insulting. But you give insulting names to everyone who's earned your respect, and I don't think you've meant it as an insult for at least the last 5 years. You are one of the 2 people I don't mind calling me Deku. Thanks, he said with smile. By the way, who told you to kill yourself? I'd like to make sure they don't do that again. Izuku stared for a moment before laughing. Kaken, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But remember when you asked about my quirk on our first day? Meet me in the waiting room after the festival is over and you'll get both your answers, I promise you. With that, he walked out to the field, where Kirishima was waiting for him, ready to give them a show. Kirishima, you better believe it, Midoriya. Let's have some fun. As soon as midnight called the start of the fight, the two rushed towards each other, throwing punches that collided hard enough to create a crack in the floor. Unlike the previous fights though, Izuku and Kirishima had decided to show off for the spectators and have some fun. Eventually though, Izuku decided to help his friend. Hey, Kirishima, how hard can you go, really? You sure you want to know, Midoriya? It kind of feels like you're struggling as it is. Izuku smiled and moved his hand in the classic bring it on, making his intentions clear. All right, you asked for it. With that, Kirishima started becoming visibly different. First, his hair gained a rocky texture. Then his fingers took on the appearance of talons, even his teeth and eyes took on rock-like traits. It wasn't quite unbreakable, but Izuku could tell that he was well on his way to reaching his ultimate form, and he smiled at his friend. Bring it on, Midoriya. Izuku just beamed as much as all might as he answered, you may regret that, Kirishima. With that, he charged at the redhead, pushing one for all to 30%, and the two clashed again. After another 5 minutes of sparring, Izuku spun around Kirishima and sent a kick at him Iowa smash. With that, Kirishima was knocked out of the ring. While the crowd cheered Izuku's victory, Izuku went to Kirishima and helped him up. Thanks for the great match. You too, Midoriya. For a minute, I thought I had you. Did I? Izuku just smiled in response. Come on, I had you there, right? Midoriya, eh? And, in case you're wondering, Kaken yelled at the audience when Aizawa was supposed to start lecturing them. His exact words were, "Who are you calling weak, you damned extras? Loudmouth sensei, you've taken a hit in my book. Look at her, her quirk is horrible for combat. Yet she's still coming at me. That makes her one of the most courageous people I know. And the fact that she keeps coming at me shows how indefatigable she is. You all think I'm not taking it easy on her because I'm some kind of villain or because I'm a sadist. Well, you're wrong. I'm not taking it easy on her because I respect her too much to take it easy." With Izuku's victory over Kirishima, there are only 5 fights left in the finals of the sports festival. First up was Ashido against Shoto, and the pink-skinned girl was extremely confident about the results. You know, Bakugo picked me for his team because my acid can melt your ice. If you think that's enough to beat me, you're sorely mistaken. Midnight called for the start of the match, and Ashido charged at Shoto, only for him to respond by freezing her in a block of ice, timed so that she could barely move her hands. Midnight quickly declared him the winner, which left only Takoyami and Ida for the quarterfinals. That match did not go how anyone expected. Ida's speed, which would have normally been a boon, turned into his great weakness, as Takoyami used Dark Shadow to mess with Ida's vision, resulting in Ida accidentally sending himself over the boundary in an attempt to push Takoyami out of bounds. That left only the semi-finals, and first up was the one match Izuku had been looking forward to, the one event he knew he could not mess up, the reason he had kept quiet about the truth so far. Izuku had been heading out to the stadium when Endeavor stepped out in front of him. "Ah, there you are, I was looking for you." "Yeah, why's that?" Izuku asked, glaring at the flame hero. "Your quirk, all that power, it reminds me of All Might. So, what about it? It's my Shoto's duty to surpass All Might as the #1 hero. His match with you will be a good testing ground to see how much training he has left to complete. So hit him hard, push him as much as possible to use his fire. I'd even be willing to pay you if you manage to do it." Izuku stared at the man in shock, but his quick mind soon realized that there was a way to take advantage of this. "I don't need money, but I would like something from you that I wouldn't even think of asking from All Might." Just as Izuku calculated, Endeavor jumped at the chance to do whatever it was. "Could you bend down? I don't want anyone else to hear what I want from you." Endeavor looked at him in confusion, but did as Izuku asked. Izuku's smirk was the only warning that Todoroki Enji received before taking a Massachusetts smash between the legs, causing him to fall to his knees in excruciating pain. That brought his nose to the perfect height for a Detroit smash, one that sent the flame hero flying out the door before crashing into the arena. Izuku stalked out of the walkway right behind him, and once the hero had stopped moving, he started talking. "I am not All Might, and Shoto isn't you. Any achievements that Shoto earns are his and his alone, not yours. Now get out of here, you bastard." Enji groaned, still in pain from the kick, but he managed to get up and walk away, only to be confronted by Detective Tsukachi, who walked the hero to a quiet corner. "It's time for the start of the semifinals, and we are finally at a match we've all been waiting for." Midoriya Izuku, who went from dead last to first place in the obstacle course and has proven to have both brains and brawn. Facing him is Todoroki Shoto, a legacy student with a chip on his shoulders and has demonstrated the power to freeze half the stadium. Let the fight begin. Instantly, Izuku's spine tingled, a feeling he had grown used to throughout the festival as an early warning of danger, and with full cowling boosting his speed, Izuku dodged Shoto's ice wall, and the two he sent after that. When the fourth ice wall made it so he couldn't dodge again, a quick St. Louis smash broke through all the walls, giving him room to move again. Shoto came again, sending one ice wall as a distraction while coming at Izuku from above. However, Izuku just danced out of the way. "You're holding back, Midoriya. You haven't thrown so much as one attack my way," Shoto complained. "Yeah, well maybe when you stop holding back, then I will as well," Izuku growled out. "Look at you. You're shaking from the cold because you won't use your quirk to its fullest ability. Hell, you're only using half your quirk. You're not even using your fire to keep yourself warm. You complain about me holding back, but you haven't even managed to brush me with your ice yet. So come at me with all you got." Shoto charged at him, clearly upset with him, though not as furious as the first time, probably thanks to Izuku's utter humiliation of Enji. However, with how slow he'd become, Izuku barely needed his danger sense to dodge his attacks. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded in an echo of Izuku's first life. "Because when I was a kid, I watched a man save 1,000 people and kept them calm by smiling the whole time. That was what made me decide to become a hero, so I could be just like him. My motivation may seem simple and trivial compared to yours, but I want to live up to that example. That's why I'm willing to give it my all, even if I need to break my body to do so. So why aren't you?" Shoto tried again to freeze him in place, but a Delaware smash shattered the ice, and his finger as Izuku worked to prove his point. "There's no way for me to know or understand what you've been through, or know how resolved you are. But stop screwing around. If you want to reject your father, fine, do that, but stop rejecting your own quirk. You're not your father if you use your fire, just like you're not your mom just because you use your ice. We all inherit our quirks from our parents in some shape or form, but that doesn't make us them. It's our power to do with as we see fit, not our parents. Your father didn't do what he did because of his quirk, but because he's ambitious and power-hungry. If you want to reject him, then do worse than refuse to use his quirk. Ignore him, block him out of your mind completely, treat him like a stranger and use your power to its fullest potential. A quirk is what you make of it. To hell with where it came from or what baggage it comes with. That was what did it." Shoto stood up, and his left side burst into flames. "You're helping your opponent, you fool, even though you want to win this battle. Now which one of us is screwing around? I want it too. I'll be a hero." Izuku smiled so brightly, it could easily be compared to All Might's signature. "Now that's more like it." Once again, the two charged at each other with their full power, and despite Cementos' attempts, the two once again blew up the entire arena. Midnight did her best, but she couldn't see anything through the dust and debris. While Aizawa and Yamada commented, she got as close as she dared and found Todoroki still standing, though only barely in the bounds of the arena. On the other side of the arena, however, Midoriya was standing in Toshinori's classic victory pose, and still within bounds. That is, he was until he took one deliberate step backwards. Todoroki is the winner. He advances to the finals. While she was still speaking, Midoriya walked over to Todoroki and raised their hands into the victory pose. What was that about? You could have continued the fight if you'd wanted to. And you still act like you won, Kayama asked, too consumed by curiosity to do otherwise. Because it was never about winning or losing the match. There's more than one kind of victory. And today, we both won. The festival was nothing compared why we actually fought this match, Izuku responded. Kayama Nimori just stared at the green-haired boy in confusion, not understanding his answer at all. But there was one thing she did know. Midoriya Izuku, you're someone to watch. I'm looking forward to seeing your future. The rest of the sports festival went the same way as the first time. Kaken beat both Tokoyami and Shoto. He still beat Shoto because while he was definitely better than the first time around, he still had some clear similarities with Enji when it came to personality. However, while the fight ended the same, he didn't react the same way when Shoto didn't go all out. You're good, icy hot, but you'll be even better after you get over your damned reservations about using your fire. Maybe next time, Bakugo. From there, they went to the awards ceremony, with Izuku sharing the podium with Tokoyami, Shoto, and Kaken. However, like last time, it wasn't their due to Ingenium having been attacked. Izuku had winced at that, as he had tried to warn the engine user about Stain, but it had apparently failed, or only resulted in the same results as the first time. Knowing Stain, it was probably the latter. When All Might had gone to give Izuku his medal, instead of offering words of wisdom and encouragement, he simply let Izuku know that Tsukachi was at the stadium and just needed to know when and where to meet them. After that, All Might awarded the medals as before, and thanks to a subtle warning beforehand, everyone cheered with him. 5 minutes later, and everyone but Tsukachi was in the room that Izuku intended to debrief everyone. So, what's going on, Deku? Why are we here? Well, first, you two are here because you've both been asking questions about my quirk. And I'm ready to answer, Izuku answered. But why now? Why not when we asked? Shoto asked. That is the second part of my answer. And it's going to have to wait until Detective Tsukachi gets here. Right now, you should know that both of you were right. I truly was quirkless until a few months ago, but my quirk is the same as All Might's. So, you truly are his secret love child? Shoto asked. Kaken stared at Shoto in shock, while Toshinori spat blood out in shock. You were serious about that? Have you ever known me to joke about anything? Izuku asked, remembering how much trouble that caused with Sir. Icy hot, you don't just ask things like that. Why not? Okay, social faux pas aside, the answer is now and always no, I am not related to All Might. My dad had a fire-breathing quirk. As it turns out, there's more than one way to inherit a quirk. And with that, Izuku explained one for all, how it worked and how he had earned All Might's attention. After I agreed to take one for All Might started training me so my body could handle the power of the quirk. Hold it, Deku, you said that weakling over there was training you. And what's he doing here anyways? I did say that, didn't I? Izuku answered with a smirk. What the hell's that supposed to mean? Isn't it obvious? Toshinori is All Might, Shoto said. Katsuki was about to object when Toshinori said, I always knew you were one of my more brilliant students, young Todoroki. Kaken twitched at that, but didn't really react until Toshinori shifted into All Might. When that happened, his eyes went wide and his jaw dropped as he stared in shock. That's different from last time. He'd barely reacted at all to finding out the truth. Then again, had just coming off the stress of having been kidnapped by Legioff villains. And all for one is definitely an intimidating figure under the best of circumstances, let alone a shis prisoner. Not to mention the devastation that resulted from All Might's final battle. What? Came 4 surprised shouts, the fourth coming from the newly arrived Tsukachi. Immediately, everyone started talking over each other, trying to get an explanation to Izuku's mutterings. After 2 minutes of that, Izuku gave up even attempting to understand them and gave a shrill whistle. Now, could you calm down and let me talk? I'm sure all your questions will be answered by the time I finish explaining my second secret. First off, Detective Tsukachi, how's your case against Shai Hasekai coming? Tsukachi looked surprised at that, but answered, quite well, actually. We've managed to arrest many of their Oyabun and Kumicho, and we've managed to hinder their production of Trigger. As for Rewind, it seems like they had a drug that only erases a quirk for a few hours, but it's done now. How do you know you stopped the production of Rewind? Izuku asked. Because we found the human source. A little girl with blue skin, purple eyes, and a tail. Izuku stared at the black-haired man. You're either lying, or you got the wrong girl. Yuri has normal skin, white hair, red eyes, and a horn over her right eye. But actually, how did you know about Yuri? Tsukachi asked. Because Eri is how I knew about Rewind 2 months before you found it. With that, Izuku explained everything he knew about his first life, Kaken's bullying and ego, his struggle to gain and control One for All, USJ and its effects on Aizawa, the sports festival and its effects on his hands, Stain, Wolfram, the attack by the League of Villains and Kaken's resulting kidnapping, the battle at Kamino Ward and the end of the Age of All Might, and finally their work studies which resulted in them finding Eri in the first place. The only explanation of what happened that I can think of is that Eri managed to use her quirk on me and accidentally sent my mind back in time. Everyone sat frozen as they processed the information Izuku had told them, Kaken having been the worst off as he hadn't said a word since Izuku had revealed who it was that had told him to kill himself. Finally, Toshi-sensei spoke up. Well, that certainly explains a few things. But just to confirm, can you tell us something personal you learned in that other life to prove that it was real? Izuku smiled. That's easy. I'll provide 3 reasons that all apply to you, sensei. First, one of the reasons you picked me is because I remind you of yourself, including the fact that you were born quirkless. Kaken twitched at that, but otherwise there was no response. Second, you had 2 senseis, one of whom is still alive, Gran Torino. Let me guess, I sent you to train with him after the sports festival? Izuku nodded, which made Toshinori grin. I thought I recognized your style of movement. Yeah, he does leave an impression, doesn't he? I'd like to train with him again this time, if he doesn't mind. Anyways, your other sensei was the one who passed One for All down to you, Shimura Nana. Toshi brightened at the memory of his master, until Izuku spoke again. She was the one who inspired you to always smile in order to reassure the people you saved. But she left behind a family. All for One found her grandson, Shimura Tenko, and then adopted him. He now goes by Shigaraki Tamura, the guy who hurt me and Aizawa-sensei and controlled the Namu at USJ. Toshinori's eyes widened in shock and pain. That's a lie, he whispered, trying to deny it. But the pain in Izuku's eyes was too real for it to be anything but the truth. Worse, it sounded exactly like something All for One would do. I attacked my master's grandchild. Kami, what would she say if she knew how we turned out? She'd tell you that it is our choices, not our heritage or our quirks that make us who we are. Surprisingly, it was Shoto that had spoken up just then. That was the lesson that you and Midoriya taught me. We are not bound to our predecessors' lives, ambitions, or goals. If anything, I think she would be proud of you for standing up for what she fought and died for and disappointed in Tamura for his betrayal. While it was obvious that Toshinori was still devastated by the news, Shoto's words had clearly helped. Thank you, young Todoroki, I needed that. Now, another question. Why didn't you say anything about the USJ incident ahead of time? First, because the worst damage was done to 13. Aizawa and myself, and even Aizawa, who took the worst of it, was fully recovered by the end of the festival. Second, because you and Aizawa both said that the USJ helped us on our road to become heroes. If the injuries had been worse, then I might have warned you. But why change things that only helped us? Toshinori thought for a moment, then nodded. And after about 30 more minutes of interrogation, he pulled Tsukachi out of the room with him. Clearly the 2 adults needed to talk for a little. Bakugo, would you mind leaving? I need to speak with Midoriya about a private matter. Kaken looked up at that, then nodded. Yeah, sure, right after I get the answer to a question of my own. Why? Izuku was confused by the question. Why, what, Kaken? After everything my other self did, why did you help me? I was a complete and total bastard to you. I even told you to kill yourself. Why? Izuku smiled at his best friend. Honestly, at first I wasn't sure what I should do. You'd hurt me terribly, but you'd also proven yourself to have great potential as a hero. We had so many complicated feelings about each other that it took a fight to even start clearing the air and become proper rivals. It wasn't until I saw you again that I made my choice. You were so happy to see me that I decided I had to at least try to save my big brother. If things didn't change, well, at least I gave it my best shot, and if they did, so much the better. Fortunately, all that was really needed to keep your ego in check was the occasional kick in the ass, he finished with a smile. HMPH, we'll see who kicks whose ass next time we spar, Deku, Kaken said with a smile as he walked out. But before he closed the door, he turned back and said icy hot, if you hurt him, I'll kill you. What was that about? Shoto asked. Izuku just shrugged, then motioned for Shoto to say whatever he wanted now that they were in private. Did you tell All Might about what we talked about? Is that why Tsukachi was investigating my father? Never. You told me that in confidence. Shoto, I would never betray the confidence of a friend. Yes, it was my motivation for having him look into your family, but I only used what was publicly available. I would never tell anyone, not even Toshi-sensei, what you told me without your express permission. Shoto smiled, and then to Izuku's shock, hugged him before thanking him. With that, they started strategizing about how to deal with Stain this time around. When Izuku left, Kaken was waiting outside. Hey, Deku, those months after we met All Might, back when you'd been blowing me off for training, what was up with that? Izuku slapped himself at that. I never did tell you, did I? Sorry, Kaken, that was when All Might was training me. I swear, I won't be pulling anything like that without at least telling you why first. Several changes had come about by the time they returned to normal school activities. It had been confirmed that Stain had attacked Ingenium, but thanks to Izuku's warning, his sidekicks had been closer, allowing the doctors to do more to help him. He was still forced into retirement as the damage to his spine wouldn't support his engines, but he would be able to walk. Also, Endeavor had been officially arrested for suspected crimes against his family, and for his excessive brutality against criminals. However, the common consensus was that Endeavor would get off, at the very least due to a plea deal. Shoto had then went and asked for Izuku to come with him to meet his mother as moral support. The doctors had welcomed them with open arms, saying that they had treated her as best as they could without Shoto there to judge how mentally stable she was now, and thankfully, the reunion between mother and son went very well. The doctors even got Shoto's number so that they could work on scheduling more visits to further test Rei's health. Finally, Izuku gave Toshinori some books on teaching for newbies at the job. Toshinori just laughed, but promised to read them while the internships were going on. Their first day back was again dominated by picking code names in the draft. The draft was basically the same, except for one thing. Izuku took third place in number of offers, with more than 25 agencies offering an internship. Fortunately, as Izuku had told Uraraka on their first day, he'd already picked his name and was the first to present it. I'm the can-do hero, Valiant. Kaken's name was also approved of, while Ada was actually willing to take on the name of Ingenium. After that, they moved on to hero agencies, and this time, Izuku took the time to give everyone advice about where they seemed weakest so they could work with an agency that helped them deal with that weakness. For the most part, the students went to the same agencies, but Shoto out of necessity had to switch, though for some reason he kept who he was going to intern with a secret. And, for those interested, the Japanese version of Izuku's code name is Deku Hero Isamashi. I must admit, I was surprised to hear from you, the hero stated. I thought you might try one of the other agencies, one that wasn't so closely connected to your father. You're one of the top heroes in Japan, of course I'd want to intern with you. You may be focused on rescue, but you are also inventive with your quirk, Shoto stated. Why wouldn't I be interested in interning with you? Well, I'm glad, and I hope you're prepared for some action. I've been asked to hunt someone down. And you're going to help, as is one of your classmates. Best Jeanist was surprised when his attempt at styling his new intern's hair was cut off by an explosion. And what was that about? He asked. Listen, I came here for one reason. You're one of the most popular heroes, and I need to learn how to become one. But if the only way you know how to do that is to turn your interns and sidekicks into you, then I'm in the wrong place. I need to learn how to be popular and still be me, temper and all, Katsuki growled out. Best Jeanist stared at the young hothead in shock for a few minutes before starting to laugh. I don't believe it. Of all the interns and sidekicks I've had, it's the hothead first-year intern that gets it. Ground zero, you just might make it. Everyone stared in shock before one of his senior sidekicks managed to ask what he meant. To be a good hero, you can't try to force yourself into being another hero. You must embrace what makes you an individual and what makes you special. I've been waiting 5 years for someone to actually stand up and say this is who I am. Now, let's get to work. To be honest though, Endeavor would have probably been a better choice. Bakugo just growled at that, remembering what he had overheard Icy Hot and Deku talking about at the sports festival. Fortunately, Izuku was prepared to meet Gran Torino again, so while he played the senile old geezer, Izuku just played along, never letting the smile leave his face. You're not too bad at handling your power, based on what I saw at the sports festival, so why are you here? He finally asked. Because I want to refine my edge. And you seem like a good person to do that, Izuku replied. Good, then let's see what you've got. The two of them sparred for the rest of the day, with Gran Torino being surprised when Izuku moved just like he did. By the end, both had several bruises over their bodies, and Gran Torino was out like a light, while Izuku was also ready to collapse in bed. First, he made sure to check on how the other internships were going. Fortunately, all of them seemed to be going well. Uraraka was enjoying her training with Gunhead. Ada was silent. Momo was getting back to her old self thanks to Midnight, and Kaken was even enjoying his work with Best Jeanist. Izuku was honestly a little confused by Ada's silence. Was Ada still trying to get vengeance on Stain, or was he just that busy? He really hoped it was the latter, but even with Tensei doing much better than his first life, Ada just wasn't talking. This is kind of hard to ask, but you're after the hero killer, aren't you? Manuel asked. I honestly couldn't think of any other reason why you'd come to my agency of all places. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you came, but you shouldn't be pursuing personal grudges. It's not like that at all, Ada stated. I'll admit that I was very upset when I learned what happened to my brother, but he's doing very well, despite his forced retirement. No, while I am hoping to defeat the hero killer and it is the reason I came here, it's only because I don't feel right taking up my brother's name while his last case remains open. It's unfinished business, nothing more, and I would let you know if I see him before doing anything else. Also, a good friend reminded me that a hero pursues criminals because of their crimes against others, not for personal reasons like revenge. Ida finished, a soft smile on his face as he remembered Midoriya's gentle reproach. He had kept that in mind while making his decision, and thinking about what Midoriya would do kept his desire for vengeance in check. Oh, well, that's a relief, Manuel stated. It had been 10 days since the end of UAS Sports Festival, and Watanabe Yuma was bored. How long are we going to have to sit here, Kima? He asked. This place has nice coffee, I'll give you that, but it's boring and it's starting to get dark. Until we get the story, Yuma. Come on, when has my quirk ever been wrong? She asked her photographer friend. Yuma had to give her that. Every time they had made it before her quirk shut down, they had broken a story that everyone else had completely missed. What do you think is going to happen, then? I'm not certain, but if I had to guess, I'd say something with Stain. He's only hit Ingenium so far, and he always hits at least 4 pros before moving on. Just then, there was a large explosion in the distance, and Yuma shot up, grabbing his camera. Don't bother, that's probably the story that will distract everyone else from this one. I'm telling you, it's going to go down in that alley, she finished, pointing down a seemingly random alley off Eku Street. Just then, 2 heroes ran by, only for one of them to suddenly stop and call out to the other. Manuel, native is down. I'm going to go help him. But the explosion. You go on, your powers are more suited to dealing with the fire. But if I don't go, native is going to die. The normal hero nodded and went off towards the fire, while the armored hero charged off the very alley that Kima had pointed out. Well, that's our cue, let's go. Yuma just groaned, once again missing his life as a well-paid voyeur. Unfortunately, the second Kima had found out about his quirk, she had practically forced him to join her in her hunt for the big stories. They got there just as Stain knocked the helmet off. Both reporters were quick to recognize him as one of the students from UAS Class 1A, and the younger brother of Ingenium. Yuma immediately started first his quirk, then his camera, and when the camera was rolling, Kima took over. This is Tanaka Kima for Yomiuri Shimbun reporting live from Hasu City, and the location of the latest attack by the hero killer, Stain. He has just attacked native, and was only stopped by the appearance of the new engine hero, Ingenium, Ada Tenya, younger brother of the first Ingenium and current first-year student at UA. Who are you? Stain asked the boy, clearly confused. Whoever you are, this isn't a place for children. No, it's a place for heroes. Hero killer Stain, I was hoping to find you. My brother sought to take you down for all the murders you've committed. Now I am here to finish the job, or at least save native. Stain looked at him, confused. I see a seed of vengeance in your eyes. But only a seed. Why are you not consumed by rage if I did kill your brother? You didn't kill him, only forced him into retirement. Also, a good friend reminded me that a hero does not seek revenge, but justice. We don't seek to take life, but to protect it. That is why I must defeat you. Ingenium answered. Something seemed to change in Stain's eyes at that statement. This friend of yours may be worthy, but you aren't. Die. With that, the fight began, but it was quickly ended when Stain drove a spike into his shoulder, then his katana into Ida's arm. You and your brother were weak because you're fakes. Fake, Ingenium demanded. Say what you will about me, I'm still just a student, but never call my brother a fake. He didn't become a hero because he wanted fame or fortune. He did it because he honestly wanted nothing more than to help people. Stain raised his blade to kill the teen, but then he was hit by a blast of air pressure. Immediately, Yuma swung the camera around to the source. Ida, I'm here to help, I hope you don't mind. The voice came from another familiar teen dressed in green with a smile on his face. Ingenium was just saved by one of his classmates, the can-do hero, Valiant, also known as Midoriya Izuku, who tied for 3rd place in the sports festival. Kima commentated. Midoriya, please, don't get involved. This has nothing to do with you, and I don't want to be the one responsible for ending your career when you have such a bright one ahead of you. Meddling where you don't have to is the essence of being a hero. Besides, what kind of hero would I be if I couldn't even save a friend? Valiant replied, still smiling. The hero killer looked surprised at the response, then smiled at the answer. This kid, he could paralyze you though. Then I guess I'll just have to make sure he doesn't get my blood. With that, Valiant started bouncing off the buildings. And when Stain lost track of him, Valiant delivered a kick to the shoulder, one that clearly popped his arm out of its socket. Just then, Valiant collapsed on the ground. Damn, you still got me, huh? Only barely, hero. The hero killer slammed his shoulder into one of the buildings, putting his arm back into its socket. You're good, much better than I was expecting, but you still fell short. And despite all the false heroes that are nothing but talk, you almost seem worthy. There's something special about you, something that reminds me of All Might. With that, he stepped back over Ingenium and raised his blade, only for a spear of ice to stab into his other shoulder. Great, another distraction. Today's been full of them. Midoriya, I thought I told you to give more details than just your location, Shoto called out. It's a good thing we discussed this beforehand. Or it may have taken me longer to get here, he stated as he slid the paralyzed trio behind him via his eyes. Sorry, just keep him busy long enough for his quirk to wear off, Valiant replied. I don't suppose you know how long that will be, do you? No, but I'm pretty sure his quirk works based on blood type. With that, the reporters returned their focus to commenting on the fight between the teens and the infamous vigilante-turned-villain. Stain often attempted to get at Shoto's blood, but between the ice walls and his flaming left side, he was unable to do so before Valiant recovered and rejoined the battle a minute after being cut. Between Valiant's constant movement and Shoto's elemental coverage, they were able to keep the madman busy long enough for Ingenium to rejoin the fight and save Shoto from getting sliced by the madman again. Todoroki, Midoriya, even though this wasn't your fight, you got involved anyways. I thank you for that. However, I will not let you shed any more blood for my sake. While his heroic words may have touched the hearts of Kima and Yuma, it only enraged the hero killer. It's no use trying to be reformed for appearance's sake. A person's true nature does not change so easily. You'll never be anything but a fraud who prioritized his own selfish desires. You're a cancer on society that warps the very essence of what it means to be a hero. Someone must teach you a lesson and correct the system. And an anachronistic fundamentalist like yourself is the one to do it, Shoto demanded. I don't think so. Stain roared in fury and charged at him, intent on killing the kid who challenged him. You idiots, Native called out as Shoto sent a wave of fire at the hero killer to protect himself. He's only after me and the kid in the white armor. Forget fighting back. Just get out of here and save yourselves. And leave you two to die. I don't think so. We could hardly be called heroes if we don't risk our lives to save those in danger. Besides, it doesn't look like he'd let me run even if I wanted to. Shoto's right. He even took the words out of my mouth for what our job is, Valiant called out as he smashed Stain's jaw. Besides, as All Might said, a real hero will always find a way for justice to be served. Then, with two mighty kicks, one to his chest by Valiant and the other to his leg by Ingenium, the three teen heroes brought down and captured the hero killer. It was only after they had stripped the man of more than a dozen blades and tied him up that Native recovered from Stain's quirk. And as thanks, he helped Ingenium to the street. Shoto created an ice pole so that he and Valiant could carry Stain out to the street. What no one, not even the reporters, expected was the reaction when they walked out of the alley and onto the street. As soon as the heroes came out with Stain hanging like a roast chicken, everyone started cheering their accomplishment. When they started cheering for Native, he stopped them. No, I deserve none of the praise. If it weren't for these brave young heroes, I would be dead by now. They saved my life, and they are the ones who captured the hero killer. What the hell are you doing here? A voice called out. Yuma just barely managed to catch a glimpse of a man in a white and yellow costume before he slammed a foot into Valiant's face. I told you to stay on the train. Valiant was quick to introduce him as Gran Torino, the hero he'd been interning with. Once the introduction was over, several people started calling the police and a local hospital. Ingenium then bowed to his friends and begged forgiveness. Although I hadn't realized it, my rage had made me short-sighted and overconfident. I should have called for help instead of trying to take him on my own. And you were injured as a result. I am truly sorry. Hey, what are friends for? Valiant asked with a smile. Then, without warning, he froze. And as Gran Torino called out, he jumped into the air and landed on a monster with pale yellow skin and wings. Yuma followed it with his camera as it flew off, only for Valiant to pull one of Stain's knives out of his belt and stab it into its exposed brain. Only after it started falling did Valiant seem to realize that he had no safe way to the ground. Then he was taken off the creature by a single red feather, which then brought him back to the group. Hope I'm not too late. These Nomas are tough customers, and my quirk really isn't suited to fighting them. Sure made me wish Endeavor or All Might were here tonight. The winged pro stated. Shoto, next time you leave, at least take a sidekick with you. Remember, legally you're not supposed to be fighting villains without supervision. Yes, sir, Shoto said with a bow. However, my friend required my help and there was no time to ask for more. If I had delayed even that much, Ada and probably Native would be dead right now. You're interning with Hawks, Valiant gasped. Ada, please tell me that you didn't let your inner darkness drag down Midoriya and Todoroki, Tsukuyomi asked. Ingenium just rubbed the back of his neck at that. Then the atmosphere changed. False hero, Stain called out. Even tied up, his fanaticism and bloodlust froze the entire group. I must make things right. Someone must be stained with the blood of the hypocrites. This sham-filled society and the criminals who wield their power in the name of mischief. I must take back what it means with that. Valiant hit him on the back of the head, silencing the hero killer once again. Elsewhere, Shigaraki and Kurogiri were watching things play out. Are you satisfied with the results, Shigaraki Tamura? That depends on tomorrow's headlines, Baka. The next morning, Shoto and Izuku shared a smile. They had successfully changed at least a little of their fight with Stain and kept him from even attempting to escape. Even better, Ida and Izuku had taken far less damage than the first time, which meant that they'd be able to get out sooner and spend more time with their current mentors. When the door opened, Izuku was a little surprised to see that Hawks had come with the other mentors and the Hasu chief of police. Honestly, what Izuku was most curious about here was how things were going to change now that Endeavor wasn't around to take the credit for their accomplishment. Fortunately, Chief Tsurugami was about to start talking, so he paid close attention. You're the UA students who took down the hero killer, right? Woof. When Shoto confirmed it, he went on. Stain has some serious injuries, including second-degree burns and multiple broken bones. He's in the hospital under strict guard. Woof. Since you are UA students, I'm sure you already know when Quirk started becoming normal. The police attached high importance to leadership and standards, seeking to maintain the status quo. As such, they decided not to use their quirks as weapons. That's where the hero profession came in to fill the gap. Woof. It would be impossible for the police to condone the use of deadly quirks such as yours if it weren't for the strict code of ethics that your predecessors chose to abide by. Even up against deadly villains like the hero killer, for uncertified individuals to cause injury with their quirks without specific instructions from their guardians or supervisors is completely illegal. As a result, your actions were completely illegal, and all 6 of you must receive strict punishment for this gross abuse of your powers. If circumstances had been right, we might have been able to sweep this under the rug by claiming Endeavor was responsible. However, that is clearly impossible, he said, tossing the paper in front of the trio. Curious, Shoto picked it up, holding it so that Ida and Izuku could also read it. The front page of the Tama Tokyo Nippo showed it all. Overcomers dominated the page, alongside a picture of the 3 of them facing Stain, with the article calling them some of the most promising UA students in years. It's not a bad name, Shoto stated with a small smile. No, it's not. I kind of like it, Izuku agreed. And here I hoped my idea would at least get considered. Ida grumbled. The 4 adults were utterly confused, but only one actually asked the question on their minds. What the hell are you going on about? Gran Torino demanded. Izuku launched into a quick explanation of his plan for the future before stating we'd been discussing names for the team before the sports festival, but couldn't settle on one. Still, it's not a bad start for us. Do you mind if I keep this? Tsurugami was so shocked at the response that he simply shook his head. Now, onto the subject of your punishment. But before he could say anything, Shoto spoke up. Hold on. If Ada hadn't stepped in, Native would have been murdered, and if Midoriya hadn't, then Ada would also be dead. No one else even knew the hero killer had struck. What else should we have done? Just stood by and watched people die and guarantee that others would die in the future. So, it's okay to break the law so long as it turns out your way. Don't try and lecture me. I've been studying the quirk usage laws for years. That law was put in place so that civilians wouldn't interfere in police or hero work, and so that civilians wouldn't be put at risk. Who was put at risk except us? At worst, we would have made no difference. Stain would go on killing and you'd have 4 bodies to bury instead of 1 or 2. Besides, it's our job to save people, no matter the risk to ourselves. Also, Hawks shouldn't be reprimanded at all. He gave me permission to check on Midoriya. Izuku also spoke up. Shoto's right about the laws. Why should we get punished for doing our jobs as heroes, whether we're licensed or not right now? Now Tsurugami was getting mad and he started growling at the teens. I had intended this to be an easy punishment, seeing as you did do us a service, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to recommend immediate expulsion and I'm charging you a fine of 1 million yen. Izuku paled at the amount. There was no way his mom could pay that kind of fine. And there was no way he'd ask Toshinori-sensei to pay, not with what would be coming all too soon. Shoto noticed and immediately said I'll pay Midoriya's fine. Ada also offered to do so as he blamed himself for getting them involved. Izuku tried to talk them out of it, only for Shoto to state Midoriya, we're both from rich families, we can cover this. If it helps, think of it as us thanking you for being a good friend. Izuku reluctantly gave in just as the two decided to split the fine 50/50. 2 days after the defeat of Stain, the media had slowed their coverage of the students and moved on to obsessing over Stain. They went over his life, his ideology, training, everything they could possibly find, and soon it became apparent that his little speech had also been found, resulting in millions of people watching it and being inspired by it. Izuku started groaning every time they heard the news talk about Stain. Let me guess, you were hoping to avoid this, right? Shoto asked. When Izuku nodded, Shoto stated, well, you also said that Dabai joined the league after Stain, right? Maybe this is the universe's way of making sure that happens and I can find out if your theory is right. Izuku shrugged at that before remembering a question. Hey Shoto, if you don't mind me asking, where are you staying right now since your dad's been arrested? I'm still at home, actually. My sister, Fayumi, never moved out. She has this notion that we can still be a happy family even with everything the old man's done to us. I think she's being naive, but who knows the future? Izuku just laughed at that, happy to see his friend making jokes. Fortunately for the trio, Yue absolutely refused to listen to Tsurugame's recommendation of expulsion. Instead, Nezu called a press conference to publicly announce the response. They blew up the Tama Tokyo Nippo page and placed it in a hall filled with other newspaper pages featuring the great deeds of students. Unfortunately, that also meant that they were mobbed by their classmates when they returned to classes, and it was only thanks to Aizawa's intervention that things calmed down. The public had a very different reaction when they found out what had almost happened to the teens. For Yue, they had nothing but praise, and the merchandise for the trio shot through the roof. In Hasu, the approval rating of Tsurugami hit an all-time low, and across the country, many started picking up the Meta Liberation War, and they were paying attention. All Might insisted on Izuku meeting him after class that day. Curious, considering the previous time had been the revelation of All for One and how he created One for All, Izuku sped there as quickly as possible. Once inside, All Might had him sit down. First, I think you should know that I warned David about his assistant and his plan. He was hurt, but he suggested that instead of revealing the truth, we turn it into a sting operation. He'll still work with Wolfram, but he'll deliver substandard devices so it will be easier to take him down. Hopefully, anyways. I also told him about One for All and my own natural quirklessness, so his device will remain locked up. That's great, Izuku said with a smile. But we're still going to the expo, right? After what you told me. Absolutely. Though I hope you and the others won't have to go through so much trouble this time and can properly enjoy the expo, he finished with a smile. I also talked to Nezu about the dorms, suggesting that we use them to show that we are concerned about your safety after the USJ, and because of what Endeavor was arrested for. They should be finished in about a week. Then we'll announce them and offer them for those who are interested at no additional cost to tuition. I also pushed making them mandatory if there is another attack on the students. And the training camp. A grand total of 3 people will know beforehand. Nezu, Aizawa, and Kan, no one else. We might not even have it in the same place as your first life. As soon as Aizawa left their classroom the next day, Izuku gave a whistle to get everyone's attention. I know we still have about 6 weeks. But if you're interested in passing the finals, I want you to come with me and Kaken today. I know the perfect place to study for both parts of the exam. Surprisingly, almost the entire class joined them on the ride to Musutafu, with only Aoyama, Kota, and Minta choosing not to join them. Deku, where are you taking them? Kaken demanded about 15 minutes into the trip. To the same place I trained preparing for the entrance exam. And you had better come as well, Kaken. What? Why do I have to be there? I'm ready for the exams. I know, that's why I want you there. You're going to be helping the others, looking at 2 that he knew would desperately need help in one area. He asked which would you rather take for hand-to-hand. Bakugo looked up to see the pair Izuku was asking about and took a moment to think. Ponytail, no question. Then he turned back to Izuku. You really think they need it? I'm pretty sure they focus too much on their quirks and not enough on regular combat. Stain even said as much about Shoto during our fight with him. Besides, I think she might have some confidence issues after the sports festival, and coming up with a plan on the fly. Kaken just gave an evil grin at that, already working on a plan. When they arrived at Takoba Beach, the entire class was excited, though a little upset that no one had brought swimsuits. Remember, we've got about 6 weeks before finals, so there's plenty of time to come here to just relax and swim. Now, I'm thinking we split up the study time between classwork and practical. Kaken, Ada, Momo, and I will lead the study groups for the written exams. Unless you're comfortable helping as well, Shoto. The bi-colored teen shrugged, not really caring either way, but willing to help because his friend asked. Wait, how can we study for the practicals if we don't know what they are? Uraraka asked. I actually talked to one of the 3rd years. He was really nice and absolutely willing to help out. Officially, every first semester final has been students against robots, Izuku explained. It had been nice to actually become friends with Mirio without the pressure of the case against overhaul or the work study weighing them down. Getting back to the present though, he could see Ashido and Kaminari cheering at the idea of fighting robots. You 2 are right, it would be easy, in fact, a little too easy, don't you think? Where are you going with this, Midoriya? Kirishima asked. Villains have directly attacked us at the USJ. And then Ada, Shoto, and I faced Stain, and let's not forget how easily Shoto and Momo took down the 0-pointers during the sports festival. I think our senseis are going to throw something tougher at us, 3rd years at best. Themselves at worst. Okay, you're our strategist. Who do you think would face each of us? Momo asked. Izuku just smiled, technically cheating, but for the sake of his classmates. He did it anyways. First, I doubt they'd be throwing the 3rd years at us. After all, they have their own finals to study for. Second, there's no way we can overpower the teachers on our own, so they'd probably pair us off. So, Kirishima and Sato have a tendency to power through attacks. So I'd put them against Cementos, who has no limits so long as he's near concrete. Momo and Shoto rely on their quirks too much, so I'd have them face Aizawa, Kaminari, and Ashido. I'm sorry to say would probably go up against Nezu to try and teach you how powerful a weapon your mind can be. Minta and Zero against Midnight because you can't get close enough to use your quirks against her. 13 can take advantage of how Uraraka and Aoyama's quirks affect their stomachs. Present Mike would probably take on Jiro and Kota, since his quirk would make it so they can't use theirs. Power Loader could booby-trap the exam area, making it so that Ajiro and Ida can't be as effective while moving. Ectoplasm's clones work best in close range, something that Dark Shadow struggles with. Snipe can target Hagakure, but I'm not entirely sure who would be paired with them. Honestly, he was sure that he could have figured that all out if he had taken the time to think about the exam the first time. And we get All Might, Kaken finished. So, we've got our worst-case scenarios figured out. Let's get to work on the written exam. We'll worry about practicals in an hour. Exactly 1 hour later the tutoring stopped, and everyone took a 15-minute break. After that, the class split up into groups to try and come up with ideas on how to defeat their teachers. Everyone, that is, except for the top 4. I assume you have a plan for us to take down Aizawa-sensei. Shoto asked. Strategy isn't your problem, Bakugo said. The two of you are both smart enough to come up with something on your own. No, we're here to work on your combat skills. With that, he pulled out some cloth bracelets. These are quirk suppression cuffs that I bought for myself 2 years ago, since Deku here was hell-bent on going to UA. He insisted on practicing martial arts and that I train with him without my quirk. That's what the two of you are going to be doing now. Sensei can erase our quirks, so I suppose it makes sense for us to learn martial arts, Momo replied. But what about you, Bakugo? Can you fight without the quirk suppressors and without causing an explosion? No, but we can train for a little while with them on. I sweat nitroglycerin, so to balance out its effects, I have a naturally high blood pressure. I should be able to train for an hour or so without feeling any ill effects. But I'll probably need to let off a few explosions after. Other than that, you're all mine, Ponytail, he finished with a feral smile. Momo gulped in fear, but prepared herself while Izuku and Shoto bowed to each other before Izuku started testing the taller boy. Unnoticed by anyone, Toshinori had arrived at the beach about 15 minutes into the tutoring session. He watched in secret as his chosen successor worked to change his classmates' fate during the finals, just shaking his head. As soon as Izuku had mentioned the I Island Expo, he had known that Izuku had lived past at least the semester finals and didn't mention it. He had tried to warn Nezu and Aizawa about the possibility of someone, namely Izuku, figuring out how they were changing the tests, but Aizawa had dismissed it. Aizawa claimed that no one would be able to figure it out because they'd never done such a thing to a first-year class before, and even if they did, they would have to be very knowledgeable about all their classmates to figure out who would go against which teacher. Toshinori shook his head. As certain as his successor was that Izuku could have figured it out the first time if he'd been given enough time. Maybe he should ask Izuku if he could borrow one of his analysis notebooks to show them how smart he is. That idea grew more attractive in his head when he noticed that Izuku was using his notebooks to advise his classmates on how to take the teachers down. It would be Aizawa's own fault. And maybe he could use this to show just how much he had underestimated their student. He had intended to use the night to train Izuku, but this was better. This was truly heartwarming, seeing his students work together, preparing for their future. His greatest hope now was living to see the kind of heroes they would grow up to be. Right there, he vowed to smash the future that Mirai had seen. He would live to see his students graduate and become pros. And to help them out, he would start by preparing them for the finals. And one more thing. The next 6 weeks brought several changes to the world as they knew it. The first, and honestly most shocking of all of them, was All Might calling a press conference to announce his retirement as a pro hero the day after Wanna started training. Honestly, I probably should have done this months ago when I decided to join the staff of UA, even more so after my students were threatened at the USJ because I was not there from the beginning. Now, this is not to say that I won't be fighting villains or helping with rescue operations. I will be keeping my license active for as long as I can. I am just going to prioritize my teaching over hero work. The entire nation, if not the world, reeled in shock at the news, and for a week, the press couldn't talk about much else. It took Nezu's announcement of the new dorms for the press to start talking about other things. Fortunately, the two announcements made the press start looking favorably on UA once again, as this was proof that they were taking their students' safety seriously. The entirety of the third years moved in immediately, followed closely by about half of the second year, as well as Uraraka, Shoto, Momo, and the entirety of the support class. Why Shoto decided to move in became clear as Endeavor was seen patrolling again shortly after the announcement of the dorms. He made a plea deal, Shoto explained one evening during the tutoring session. pled guilty to abuse and paid a huge fine in exchange for the dropping of the murder charge and release from jail. He paid another large fine to cover the excessive force charges as well. All Might later explained that most of the evidence that Tsukachi had towards the murder charge was circumstantial at best, so the police weren't too upset about not having to try to fight the charge in court. "And what about your mom?" Izuku asked. "She's been moved from the hospital she was in to another in the same system closer to UA. Her doctors even decided to transfer with her so she has some familiar faces." He smiled for a second before speaking again. "It makes it easier for me to visit her after school now. The doctors say that she might even be released in a few months if she keeps improving at this rate." Surprisingly, Shoto also revealed that Endeavor had taken some of his remaining money and given it to Natsuo so he could buy a house for the four of them. That way, at the least, his family could start healing from the wounds that he had inflicted on them. He had even sent a message to Shoto saying that he was proud of him for his part in taking down Stain. Those two actions had surprised Shoto, and he honestly wasn't sure how he should feel about his father now. Something Shoto had not told Izuku though was that he was doing something else to save his family, and that was getting in contact with Dabai. It had taken a month for him to just find someone who could get him in contact with the man that both he and Izuku suspected was his brother, and then another week to get Dabai's contact information. Shoto had been sending texts to Dabai at every opportunity, but the fire wielder had yet to respond. In connection with the All Might news, Izuku had been shocked to see Toshi-sensei join him the day after the announcement in order to help his classmates with their strategies to defeat their teachers and was giving each of them personalized advice on how to work on their quirks. In fact, Yagi Tashinori became a common sight at Takeover Beach, and it wasn't long before the entire class was comfortable with him. Another piece of news came from Tsukachi. His work against Shai Hasekai had come to a standstill. The Yakuza gang had gone underground, and Overhaul had vanished. On a more personal note, no one except a few doctors and Aizawa were allowed to see Eri once they had discovered her quirk. Part of it was fear of what she could do if she activated her quirk, and the rest was to keep her location absolutely secret. Unfortunately, the heroes weren't the only ones working at the time. Shigaraki Tamura, formerly known as Shimura Tenko, was meeting with his adoptive father and sensei, all for one. What now? The sports festival wasn't exactly the eye-opener we hoped it would be. How are we supposed to undermine society's faith in heroes unless we can get a hold of someone we can convince to join us? What do I always tell you, Tamura? Simply have a little patience and the right connections, and the answers will come. With that, he handed a USB drive to the Decay wielder. This drive contains the history and profiles of every hero student currently at UA. Study this, and your targets will become obvious. In Nagoya, others were also plotting for the future. The motto, "I want you to find Eri. I don't care how much money you have to spend to do it, just find her. When the time is right, Rappa will break in and get her. Then our plans can continue." "And when will be the proper time?" Mimic asked. "How long do we have to wait, Overhaul? Can't you feel it? A storm is brewing, and when it breaks, everyone will be focused on it, not some cursed little girl. Once the heroes and police are distracted, we get Eri back, and then the Shai Hasekai will rise to the top again." Dabai stared at his phone in shock. How did Shoto get a hold of his number, and more, why did he start texting him? The texts were certainly interesting to say the least, especially when it came to Endeavor. Maybe, just maybe, things could actually work out in his favor, and the two brothers could work together to bring their father down. Even if he was trying to make up for it, Dabai didn't think he could ever forgive his father. It had taken 2 years of under-the-radar therapy to merely recognize the damage that his father had caused him mentally by pushing his obsession onto him, let alone undo it. No matter what it took, Dabai would show the world the truth behind Endeavor. Then there was this Midoriya kid to consider. Shoto sure spent a lot of time talking about him. Did Shoto? Hey, didn't matter. This kid was helping Shoto recover, so Dabai would protect him as best he could. And the best way to do that would be to join this Shigaraki guy and his League of Villains. Finally, the day of the exams arrived, and for once, everyone was actually calm when it came to the tests. Thanks to the group study sessions, even Kaminari and Ashido felt prepared for them. Once the written exams were completed, they were led to the central plaza near the battle arenas, and were immediately greeted by nearly the entire staff of UA. Aizawa greeted them, then mentioned that some of them probably gathered information about the test, resulting in Minta crowing about robots. Actually, this year's test will be completely different, for various reasons, Nezu exclaimed from within Aizawa's capture weapon. The tests now have a new focus. There will be hero work, of course, but also teamwork in combat against actual people. So what does that mean for you? We're going against the teachers, Kaminari explained excitedly. Well, yes, Nezu said hesitantly. And your partners and opponents have already been chosen. Aizawa started listing off each team and their opponent. And with each team listed, the students only grew more and more excited. Oh yeah, we have this in the bag, Sato said with a smile. The teachers stared in confusion. Weren't they supposed to be panicking by now? Okay, why are you guys so calm about fighting us? Snipe asked. Because our class rep predicted this, right down to the matchups, and we've been practicing for them for 6 weeks now. Ashido explained. The eyes of every teacher save All Might widened in shock before staring at Midoriya. Sure, his grades were among the best in the class, but how did he figure everything out right before they made the decision? Nezu, on the other hand, stared at the greenette in interest. Perhaps he had the chance to take on an apprentice, something to consider for the future, but right now he had a job to finish. To complete the exam, you'll have 30 minutes. In order to win, you must either place your opponent in these handcuffs or one of you must escape from the combat stage. Sometimes you will find yourself in a fight that you cannot win, All Might explained. For example, the fight at the USJ had several villains beyond your skill level. Or, as I'm sure young Bakugo is getting tired of, sometimes your quirk isn't suited to fighting the villain. The wisest thing to do then is to call for backup while a partner keeps the villain busy. Seriously, All Might, did you have to bring up that sludge guy? I was sick of talking about him within a week, Bakugo complained. In any case, this test will be as close to a real-life fight as we can do safely, Kayama-sensei continued. You must think of us as villains. Do not hold back against us. If you think you can take us, then fight. But if you find yourselves outmatched, then by all means, run away. Think of it as a test of your decision-making skills. They then explained the compressed weights and then started Sato and Kirishima's test. Due to the training, most of the class had already figured out a strategy and decided to just watch the tests. The duo made it seem like they were going for a frontal assault. But much to Cementos' surprise, they had gone for a very different approach, with Kirishima using his lack of vision against him. He used the cover that Cementos had created in order to flank him and knock him out with a single hard hit, winning the match easily. I knew Kirishima would win, Kaken called out. Did you just call Kirishima by his real name? Izuku asked in shock. But the blonde refused to answer, leaving Izuku to wonder what it meant, if anything. He'd never known his friend to call anyone but an adult by their real name before, so what was happening now? The next fight went even smoother than it did the first time around, with Usui and Takoyami easily defeating Ectoplasm, while Ajiro and Ida also managed to win in a similar manner to the first timeline. Though this time Ida avoided getting buried. Shoto and Momo, on the other hand, also managed to win in a similar manner, but due to Momo's higher self-confidence in her judgment and planning and Shoto talking to her beforehand, they won within 5 minutes and with not even a hint of Aizawa going easy on them. They even managed to land a few punches on their sensei. And that's why I gave her my vote for vice rep, Izuku said with a smile. Wait, you voted for her? Ida asked. Why her and not me? Let's face it, Ida, if you had won the election, you'd be one of the strictest reps ever. You're just too stiffly bound by your own code to ever take things easy, Izuku said, smiling so his friend didn't take it too hard. Everyone laughed at the answer, while Ida just sweat dropped at the answer. He wasn't that bad, was he? Next up were Aoyama and Uraraka. And with some blasts from Aoyama's laser aimed at the ground around 13, they were able to distract the space hero long enough for Uraraka to use her gunhead martial arts to take her down. When Ashido and Kaminari went up against Nezu, they ran towards the falling buildings, using them as cover and backtracking them to find Nezu. When they arrived at his crane, Ashido melted the wires holding the wrecking ball while Kaminari threatened him with his tasers. Well, this is an outcome I didn't predict. I surrender, Nezu said with a smile. Koda and Jiru's fight went the same as the first time, due to Koda's shyness preventing him from joining the study session. Shoji and Hagakure also used the same strategy. Zero, on the other hand, did much better, as he had prepared his tape as protection for his lungs and mouth, allowing both of them to win. Finally, it was Bakugo and Izuku's turn to face All Might, with Toshinori-sensei joining them for the beach training. It had limited their time to plan to when it was just the two of them. Fortunately, they had the advantage of being old friends, so it was easy of them to just visit each other's homes, eat dinner there, and plan out their victory. So, which plan do you want to go with, Kaken? How's your new style coming along? He asked in response. Izuku just gave a vicious grin in response. Perfect. Then let's go with Plan AF to start with. All Might started with a single punch down the main thoroughfare, absolutely wrecking the place. Who really cares if I destroy this city? He called out, going into full intimidation mode. But to his shock, when the dust cleared, the boys were nowhere to be seen. Running away. That's not going to work, he called again. At least one of them had to be close by. The exam had only just started, and young Bakugo couldn't move as fast as Izuku. So, the question was, where was he? The answer came when a large blast hit him from behind. But when he turned to face the teen, he was hit from behind again, this time by a gust of wind. So, that's how they were going to play this? Interesting. Well, that was easy to deal with. He was hit one more time by each before he had a chance to retaliate by starting up an Oklahoma smash. But when he stopped spinning, neither of the boys were on the ground. Where were they? He took another 2 blasts before. There, a flash of green between the buildings. But he couldn't tell which one it was. Oh well, it was one of them so. All Might rushed in and grabbed the boy, only to be hit with an explosion to the back again. He quickly turned, only to take another explosion to the face. Deku switched to Plan E. Plan E. Had they really? His thoughts were cut off when Izuku delivered a St. Louis smash to his head, followed closely by an Iowa smash to his weak spot. Damn, Izuku was not holding back. To think he hadn't believed his successor could be cutthroat enough to really make it in the hero world. Sorry, All Might, but you said it yourself, you're a villain now, and that means we can't hold back. Izuku yelled back at his hero as he ran off. He was honestly surprised at how long AF had lasted, as neither of them had believed it could last more than 4 attacks. Now, based on the plan, Kaken would attack next. And when All Might went for him, Delaware Smash Air Force. The sudden gust of air sent Izuku's mentor flying backwards. Izuku stared at his mentor's flight and realized something. Kaken, change in plans, let's go to A. Katsuki stared at his old friend in shock, but considering just how well the nerd knew All Might and his quirk, he took the change in stride and turned around with a massive grin on his face. Let's win this, Deku. Howitzer impact, he called out, launching what was still his most devastating attack. Izuku also charged in with a Manchester smash. The hits were fantastic, but for once, Izuku had overestimated the damage they'd done. On anyone else, they would have won, but this was All Might, the symbol of peace. Tell me, did you really underestimate me, boys? I might have to teach you a lesson about that. Namely, never underestimate your opponents. With that, he destroyed young Bakugu's gauntlets, then grabbed Izuku by the arm and started spinning around in another Oklahoma smash, sending both boys flying across the area. But All Might was surprised when he noticed, or rather failed to notice, the sound of their impact. He didn't throw them that far, did he? Ah, nope, they'd just worked together to get a soft landing in the dirt, and were now running away. Well, he couldn't allow that, so he charged at them again. So, what now? Are you going to run away? He asked. Not a chance, young Bakugu replied before blasting him again, and with a power that All Might hadn't realized he could pull off without his gauntlets. When the smoke cleared, he was just standing there, smiling. You're just going to stand there, even though I'm still here and standing. Wait, where was Izuku? Why should he move, sensei? We've already won, Izuku said from behind him. All Might raised an eyebrow at that, only for Izuku to nod down at his arms. When he did, All Might gasped in surprise. That last blast wasn't to continue the fight. It was a smokescreen so that Izuku could handcuff him without being spotted. He was so proud of them. 10 minutes later, Aizawa stood before his class. Well, I must say that you have done something no other class has done before. You've managed to impress me. Any first year can win going against the robots. But you lot have not only managed to push us to go beyond, but you have overcome our obstacles. Every last one of you has managed to pass the finals. And you're all going to the training camp. The start of summer had Izuku preparing for the 2 trips he'd be making. I Island was easy enough. Everyone had stayed about a week on the island for the expo, even after the disaster with Wolfram. Preparing for the camp would be a little more difficult though. Would they last the full week this time with the heightened security? Should he bring some things to create better meals, or prepare for the Vanguard Action Squad? Eventually, he decided to wait to prep for the camp until after the shopping trip and work on the summer work. The optional class went about the same as before, though this time Izuku had Takoyami and Kaminari to replace Kaken and Uraraka, while Shoto was able to stick around. Also, while they had a complicated plot again, it was quite different from the romance story from his first life. As it happened, Momo's team of Uraraka, Sato, and Koda got that particular story, while Kaken's team of Kirishima, Ashido, and Ajiro had yet another story just as complicated. Honestly, the teachers probably had way too much time on their hands if they could think of stories like that. Strangely, the night before the summer class, he'd had another dream about One for All, only this time it focused on Shimura Nana. I believe you have proven worthy of our trust and our sacred duty, she had said to him. It is truly your turn now. Accept my gift, and do your best to bring hope to the world, Midoriya Izuku. A few hours after the class and they had set off to I Island. And this time his mentor knew better than to test him on any kind of hero-related trivia. Between his 2 lives, Izuku had forgotten more hero trivia than most people ever learn, ranging from the identities of the more respectable vigilantes to listing the top 500 heroes in order to their fighting styles and weaknesses. They were once again mobbed when they left the airport, but this time some people were actually interested in Izuku. Honestly, he'd thought interest in him had died down after Stain had taken the spotlight. But nope, this was one thing he hadn't predicted happening. He was just glad that no one tried to kiss him like they did All Might, and that the crowd was gone by the time Melissa showed up. Izuku let the 2 of them get caught up, smiling at the obvious familial love between them, and happy that he'd be able to change Dr. Shield's fate. Last time he'd been thrown into prison, and it was only due to All Might's fervent lobbying that he'd managed to avoid Tartarus. This time though, Whoa, Melissa just surprised him by recognizing him. Hey, you're Izuku Midoriya, right? You're one of the overcomers. And you're one of Uncle Might's students. Izuku just blushed at her reaction, causing All Might to laugh at the situation. The blush only deepened when she started analyzing his costume. Armored legs and shoes. But outside of that, it's pretty simple. Mind if I come up with some alternative designs? You design costumes? Izuku asked in shock. That had never come up the first time around. Support items. Sure, he'd have never been able to defeat Wolfram without the full gauntlet, but never costumes. Well, considering how my dad got famous designing Uncle Might's costumes, I think it was kind of destined to be my first obsession, she answered with a grin. All Might was quick to get them refocused on meeting her dad again, so they continued talking on the way. So, do you want me to call you Izuku or Valiant? Either is fine with me, whichever you feel comfortable with. By the way, if you're interested in designing costumes, you think you could help a friend with his costume? Izuku asked. Sure, who is it? Todoroki Shoto. His first design was an insult aimed at his dad, and his second is basically our gym uniform designed to handle his quirk. Melissa thought for a moment, then snapped her fingers. He's the one you were fighting when you blew up the stadium, right? And he was one of the overcomers as well, right? Yeah, I can do that, but it would be best if I could see him and his quirk in action first. Well, he's probably here. He is the son of Endeavor after all, Izuku said, hoping his friend still received his invitation. Wait, what if he didn't? That could really throw things off if he didn't come. Would Kaken and Kirishima survive if Shot wasn't her? Blasterini, member of one. Athet could rep. Lace him that. Show it up last time. Don't worry, Izuku. I talked to young Todoroki before we left. Endeavor received the invitation and passed it on to him as another attempt at an apology. I even offered him a chance to come with us if he didn't want to use his father's ticket. All Might reassured him, easily spotting the nervousness on his apprentice's face. Fortunately, young Todoroki was perfectly willing to use his father's ticket if it meant helping Izuku, especially since he knew how important facing Wolfram was. In fact, when he'd visited him in the dorms, young Todoroki had already been packing, simply explaining that since it was important to Izuku then he'd be going. Toshinori had just smiled at that, though he did start wondering just how close the two of them were and what they meant to each other. Enji's crimes were the first thing Izuku had asked Toshinori to look into, and had mentioned that he'd suffered his worst injuries trying to help young Todoroki during the sports festival. And now this. All Might had no more time to wonder, as they arrived at David's lab and the two old friends happily reunited, with Izuku barely managing to keep from fanboying over the famous scientist again, barely being the key word. The two friends then quickly dismissed the others so All Might could relax and they could discuss things. Are you sure you don't want the helmet, Toshi? David asked. Toshinori smiled at his friend. Dave, I truly appreciate the offer, but there's two problems. First, I'm naturally quirkless, so it wouldn't help me for long. Besides which, think about how old we are. I've been at this for 40 years now. How much longer could I go on even if I'd been born with my quirk? Also, can you imagine the problems that could result if I lost it? How long before some disreputable company like Detonaret got a hold of it and reverse engineered it? God, I wish you could release it, but something like that could change the world as much as quirks did. David paled at the idea of someone like Rikiya Yatsubashi getting a hold of one of his devices. As much as he hated it, he could now understand why his helmet was locked away. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked, desperate to help his oldest and dearest friend. Oh, I'd let you know if I thought of something. However, outside of a new stomach and lung, all I really need is help with my students. David grinned and promised I'll do what I can, Toshi. Melissa once again proved to be a fantastic tour guide for the expo, even taking Izuku's fanboying in stride. Izuku, I wasn't expecting you to be here, a familiar voice called out about 2 hours into the tour. Izuku turned with a smile to greet his classmates. Hi Momo, Jiru, Uraraka, it's good to see you again. But what are you doing here? I believe I asked you first, class rep, Momo countered. Oh, I came with Toshi-sensei and All Might to meet a friend of theirs. And this is Melissa Shield, the daughter of Dr. David Shield. She's been showing me around the expo. Momo raised an eyebrow and pulled Izuku to the side. Why did you introduce her as Melissa Shield and her father as David Shield? Shouldn't it be Shield Melissa? Izuku smiled at the cultural misunderstanding and answered her in Japanese. They're Americans, remember? Their names are backwards from ours. Personal names come before family names. Momo was a little upset with herself at forgetting that piece of information, but they quickly overcame it. When they met Kaminari and Minta at the cafe though and they demanded an introduction, Izuku banged their heads together. Consider yourselves lucky that I don't stick your heads to the floor. Be nice to her or you will regret it, got that? Ada also berated their classmates, explaining that he was there due to being an Ada, but due to obligations, he was the only one able to make it, while Momo's father owned stock in I Island. A distraction came with an explosion to the north. Another of your classmates? Melissa asked when they arrived. Yep, that's Kirishima. His hero name is Red Riot, and he probably came with Kaken. Bakugo Katsuki, the guy who won the sports festival. Naturally, that's when Kaken announced his presence. Deku, get down here and test your time. I want to know who's better at this. Izuku grinned, and with a wave from the announcer, jumped down and prepared for the race with 35% of one for all. Even taking the slow route and destroying the robots individually, it only took him 7 seconds. Shoto was next to be spotted as before, and Izuku was quick to introduce him to Melissa. And with a brief summary of his quirk, her mind went to work on costume ideas. Creating ice and fire, Well, that can be a little tricky, but then what? His current costume Hazel Red Eye dealt with that. Their problem is a lack of style. Interesting, she sounds like you when you're analyzing a quirk, Midoriya, Shoto commented. Izuku blushed at that, as did Melissa, but the tour was able to continue for the rest of the day. When they split up, Ada was quick to suggest entering the party as a group. That's a good idea, but let's give the girls some extra time to get ready. 7 o'clock sounds better. Ada, as expected, bent to his class rep's commands and the group split up. However, before Izuku could head to his room, Melissa spoke up. Valiant, could you come with me? I'd like to show you something. Izuku suspected he knew what this was about, but followed her anyways. As before, she guided him to her personal lab in the I Island Academy. Once the door was closed, she outright asked him, how much do you know about what's going down during the expo? Everything, I think. Why? Are you sure that my dad will be okay? What happens if the authorities think he actually was in on this? I can't bear to think of him in prison. Izuku winced at that, remembering just how distraught she'd been the first time. Losing her father to prison had badly hurt her. And the Battle of Kamino only 2 weeks later had caused her to drop out of the academy due to her grief. That had actually been why he was willing to deal with Hatsune when it came to designing his Gamma costume. Melissa, I swear to you that your dad won't be implicated at all. All Might and I both know that your dad's on our side and there's no way we'll let him be arrested. Melissa looked relieved at that. Thank you. Now, can you tell me just how Uncle Might knew about the whole thing in the first place? Actually that's because I told him. Melissa stared at him and Izuku told her about Uri's quirk, the accident, and what happened at I Island the first time. Neither of you deserved what happened the first time. And your dad was clearly simply trying to help his friend out. He shouldn't have been punished for that. Melissa just stood there for a few minutes before hugging him. Thank you for thinking about us. The hug stopped abruptly when she demanded, wait a minute. Why didn't you warn Uncle Might about his injury? Honestly, there are 2 reasons. First, when he was hurt, I was just a 10-year-old fanboy. Why would he listen to me? Second, he never told me much about how he was hurt, or even when exactly the fight was, so I couldn't actually warn him. That was one of his biggest regrets when it came to his time travel. For all that Toshi-sensei was a great mentor and teacher, he was an extremely private person who rarely talked about his past. Between Shimura's death, Dr. Shield's fate, and the fallout with Night Eye, Izuku figured that his sensei just had too much pain to be able to cheerfully talk about the old days. The most excited he'd been to talk about his past had been on the trip here, and that didn't last long at all due to Wolfram. I suppose you already know about this, then, Melissa said with a sad smile. The full gauntlet. Of course I know it. First time around, this was one of the main reasons we were able to win. He'd been smart enough to realize that I couldn't use one for all at full power without injuring myself and offered this to help out. It was one of the nicest things anyone had ever done for me. It was one of the things that made me decide I wanted you to design my support items. You're one of the most brilliant people I know, Melissa, and don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Melissa blushed before thanking him and letting him go to his room to dress for the party. Half an hour later, most of the invited members of WANA had arrived at the doors to the reception party, with only Kaken and Kirishima missing. When Ida suggested that they had blown off the whole thing, Izuku had to disagree. While I could easily see Kaken doing that, there's no way Kirishima would let him. They've probably gotten themselves lost. Lost in this place? Melissa asked. I don't think that's possible. You clearly don't know Kirishima then, Momo said. If he doesn't have his phone or someone with him, he can get lost anywhere, including inside UAS main campus. Everyone smiled as they thought of one of the times Kirishima had gotten lost, until the alarm sounded and the mission began. Melissa was quick to explain that what they had heard was not the correct protocol for a bomb threat, and then she guided them to a place where they could communicate with All Might. Once he had noticed them, he passed on his message. The villains have taken over the tower. They have control of the security system and are holding the entire island hostage. All the heroes that were here at the party are neutralized, and they took David's shield and his assistant with them. I don't know why. It's dangerous, but you're hero students. Whatever you choose to do, I trust you to do the right thing. They decided to discuss things in private, and Ada had a solid opinion on what to do. We don't have our licenses yet. The right thing to do would be to escape and find help. Momo and Kaminari were quick to agree, but they turned to Izuku to see what he would say. Legally speaking, it is correct, but is it the morally right thing to do? Izuku asked. The first generation of heroes didn't ask if what they were doing was legally right or not. They knew that with great power comes great responsibility. They had the power to help, and as a result they believed they also had the responsibility to help no matter how the law or the public viewed them. Besides, how can it really be the right thing to sit back and do nothing? Can we really call ourselves heroes if we do nothing when the entire island is in danger? Finally, all we really need to do is regain control of the security system, and we may be able to avoid fighting the villains until then. I'm coming with you, then. You'll need someone who knows the security system if you're to actually save the island, Melissa stated. I know I'm just a liability until we get to the top floor, but I want to help. People are in danger, and I want to protect them too. Valiant just smiled at her. I would never keep someone from helping if they believed they could. Let's go to work then, overcomers. With a quick thumbs up to All Might, the 18 started on their way. Once again, they made it as high as the 80th floor before running into problems, and they found Kirishima and Kaken there. Seriously, Kirishima, how on earth did you go the completely wrong direction in a tower? Izuku asked. And Kaken, why did you let him lead you around? I have my reasons, Deku, Kaken yelled out. With a blush, Izuku thought about talking to Kaken about it, but decided he didn't want to delve too deep into those waters. As a result, when Shoto said that the three of them would hold off the villains, he followed the younger teen's suggestion immediately. Things basically proceeded as before until the 130th floor, where they encountered the sentries. Ada and Momo were going to let Kaminari try and take them out, but Izuku stopped them. Hold on, I've got a new super move that I've been meaning to try out. This seems as good a time as any. New super move? The girls asked. Izuku just smiled and opened the door, charging one for all to a mere 10% just to be safe. Hey you dumb robots, over here. As soon as the sentries had come after him, he called out Los Angeles Smash. As he stomped down on the catwalk, the attack worked, almost exactly like he planned. The sentry drones were taken out, as well as part of the catwalk, and the floor behind him was damaged. Sorry guys, I haven't quite perfected it yet. It's only supposed to affect what's in front of me. Yeah, keep working on that, Jiru complained as she and the others picked themselves off the floor. Izuku, maybe you should also try to keep from destroying our walkway, Momo suggested. Izuku blushed at that, but thanks to Uraraka, they were able to keep going. When they made it to the server room, Momo ordered Kaminari to leave. We have no idea what your electricity could do to the servers, so get going. Once outside, Melissa explained her plan to get to the top, but Izuku stopped her. Uraraka, don't bother, I can do this without your quirk. Just help Kaminari defend against the sentries. I'm sure the villains will send them out here as well. Uraraka gave him a quick nod. And when Melissa was on his back, Izuku jumped as high as he could. It wasn't enough, but as he had hoped, Shimura Nana's float activated and he was able to actually fly to the door. This feeling, this freedom was so wonderful. Honestly, he felt like he could do this forever, but Melissa's weight on his back reminded him of his responsibilities and they landed on the catwalk. 3 minutes later and Izuku took Sorkle out with a single kick to the head before the villain could even try to cut them. With the last villain save Wolfram dealt with, Izuku walked into the control room. Just as he did so, Dr. Abraham opened the box with the quirk amplifier inside. Dr. Shield, I think it's time to end this, don't you? Valiant asked with a smile. Yes, it is, young man. Dr. Abraham stared in confusion, only for Valiant to rush to him and destroy the device. Do you even know what you just destroyed? That was years of research, a way to amplify quirks without damaging the body or mind like drugs do. Do you have any idea what this could do? How many heroes this would help? The blonde demanded. All too well, Valiant responded, only to be grabbed by the floor and pinned to the wall before he could react. Wolfram, he growled out. You know who I am. Well, that's unfortunate. Sam, where's the device? The boy destroyed it. He has a strength-enhancing quirk. Dr. Abraham replied quickly. Did he now? That's a shame. Wolfram replied before shooting the man through the center of his chest. Honestly, I was going to kill him anyways, but considering the fact that he failed to live up to his end just sped it up. And don't think you're getting out of this, David Shield. Even if we had been fake villains, you committed a crime, and that makes you no better than us. Unless I played along so I could deliver you into the hands of heroes, Dr. Shield countered. Wolfram's eyes widened at the response. It's called a sting operation, Wolfram. All Might did some digging for me and found out that you're a wanted man in several countries, including our home countries. Your time has ended. Not likely, Wolfram countered as he used his power to bring the scientists to him. The heroes are all trapped in the reception hall. And with both you and your device missing, the police will assume you came with us willingly. And with the kids and Sam dead, there will be no witnesses to testify otherwise, he finished, pointing the gun at Melissa. With that threat, Izuku pushed himself to the highest amount of OFA he'd ever used, 40%, and burst through the metal, intending to deliver a Manhattan smash to the villain. Unfortunately, even that wasn't enough to make him fast enough to hit Wolfram, resulting in another hit to a wall. But he was able to stop the minion with a Delaware Air Force, allowing Melissa to escape quicker, and then he went after the professor. Hold it, I'm not done with you yet. Release the professor, now. Okay, now you have to die, you brat. With that, Wolfram slammed his palm to the floor and several pillars started charging at Valiant. The problem with planning for the fight against Wolfram was that he honestly didn't know how powerful the villain actually was. His greatest feats were all with the amplifier, yet it seemed as though his secondary quirk of muscle augmentation also affected his metal manipulation. As a result, he had several guesses about how powerful the villain was, but no solid evidence in favor of any of them. Due to that, Valiant decided the best thing to do was to preserve his strength and avoid the pillars coming at him, using float when his Gran Torino-inspired jumps weren't enough. Unfortunately, even with danger sense, it wasn't enough to completely avoid the onslaught. Valiant was slammed to the floor first by one, then by 6 different pillars. You give the professor back. He has a daughter to inspire. He called out. Don't you dare lose that smile, young Valiant. A familiar voice called out. Sure enough, All Might came flying up the building, damaging the props on the helicopter and rescuing his friend before the helicopter could even take off. Don't worry, Dave, you're safe now. I'm always safe with you around, Toshi, David replied with a smile. It's not over, a voice called from the helicopter. I'm not stopping until I see you lose that damned smile. Wolfram yelled out. With that, his skin started glowing red, and from Izuku's perspective, it looked like he was trying to do what he had done the first time with the quirk enhancer. Well, there was no way that was going to happen on his watch again. Izuku started pounding on the pillars that had trapped him, only to be instantly freed by several explosions. Come on, Deku. This is no time to be lazing about. Thanks, Kaken. He called back, noting that Melissa was with Shoto, Kirishima, and the others. Shoto, Kirishima, protect Melissa. All Might and I can take care of Wolfram. The two nodded their assent, and Valiant took a jump towards the villain. Wolfram struggled to come even close to the power that the device had given him, but he worked for it nonetheless, and he did seem to be trying to create some barrier to protect himself, which made it all the more important that he fail. All Might, let's do this. Way ahead of you, young Valiant. His mentor called out. The two started running at the villain together, and with a silent message between them. All Might leapt towards Wolfram while Valiant stopped and delivered a Los Angeles smash only a few feet away from the base of the tower Wolfram was trying to create. Combined with All Might's Texas smash, the tower was destroyed and Wolfram collapsed in exhaustion. Well, that wasn't so bad. Was he really that hard to defeat the other time? Toshinori asked when it was just the 6 in the no left on the tower. We honestly thought he killed you for a minute. You have no idea just how powerful the professor's device was. I honestly think if you had worn it, it would have done exactly what he hoped, brought you back to your prime. I'm so sorry for that, David said. I was just too scared to lose you. Toshi, too caught up in protecting the status quo that I forgot to look to the future. It happens to the best of us, Dave, Toshinori responded, thinking back to how he had left things with Mirai after his first battle with All for One. Fortunately, it's never too late to catch that light shining forth, he said with a smile, looking at the team. Yes, lucky for us, David agreed. The Battle of I Island made headline news around the world. Many of the reporters that had come for Expo interviewed the Shields, All Might, and the students of WANA that had participated. The Tama Tokyo Nippo was quick to notice that Izuku, Shoto, and Ada had once again participated, and proclaimed it as another victory by the overcomers. It is becoming clear that these young heroes are the real deal and possible successors to All Might. They risk themselves, their status as heroes, and even their enrollment at UA to do the right thing for society and the average citizen. I look forward to seeing how these teens grow and shape our future, wrote editor Kobayashi Asai. Others were more critical, reviving Chief Tsurugami's call for the Hasu trio to be expelled or suffer some other punishment. However, the biggest crowd was clearly on their side, and calling for a new look at quirk usage laws, especially when it came to hero work, but also to practical usage. With Uraraka getting in the news, reporters had spoken to her family and learned that her parents both had quirks that were useful in their construction company, but due to quirk laws, they couldn't use their quirks while working. That's not right. The cry came, and yet more people picked up the Meta Liberation War. Fortunately, said students were only to learn about the repercussions after the expo was over. The afternoon following the battle was full of interviews, but after that they were left alone. As a result, Toshinori was able to spend a large amount of time with his students in his true form, teaching them things about being a hero that would never show up in the UA curriculum. One of those discussions happened 3 days after the battle. What do you believe is the one trait that every hero must have? Toshinori asked. Adherence to the rule of law. Ada was quick to reply. Toshinori just chuckled at the oh-so-predictable answer. That's an interesting answer, but definitely wrong. Were your actions the other day legal? Or what about Hasu? or even the first generation of heroes. There are also the vigilantes, heroes who operate outside the law. Yet many of them are highly respected by the people that they serve. Laws are important, yes, but sometimes one's duty as a hero must come first. Any other ideas? Self-sacrifice, Shoto said, thinking of how Izuku had inspired him. Now that's a much better trait, and indeed, nothing is nobler than self-sacrifice. However, one must know how to moderate that trait. What good will it do if you sacrifice yourself to stop one villain when there are 4 or 5? Or if you use so much of your power that you're taken out of the fight with one attack? Here he gave a pointed look at Kaminari, who could only look down and blush in response. Panache, Hayama suggested, only to be met by the laughter of his classmates. Do you really think that Aizawa-sensei has any panache, dear? Ashido asked. I doubt he even knows what it means, Kota hesitatingly suggested. No, it wouldn't suit his style or methodology, Takoyami agreed. Wisdom then, Momo stated. While wisdom certainly helps, it's far from necessary for a hero, Toshinori responded. Even more so when one considers the fact that wisdom is gained through experience, which is why UA and other hero schools put so much focus on the training scenarios, so that you can gain the necessary experience with relatively low risk to yourselves and others. Fearlessness then, Bakugo threw in when he saw that the others either couldn't or wouldn't answer. One would think that, wouldn't you? But no, fear can be a powerful motivator. No, the most essential trait for a hero is courage. Courage is not fearlessness, it is quite different. Courage is the will to act despite one's fear, or even because of your fear. Fear can push you to go beyond your limits so long as you have the ability to overcome that fear and use it. So if you face something or a situation where you are afraid, push yourself beyond that fear and act, no matter the danger to yourself. 3 days later, Melissa asked Izuku and Shoto to come to her workshop. The duo looked at each other in confusion, as Melissa had spent a surprisingly small amount of time with them after the first day to the point that they almost thought that she was avoiding them. Sorry about this, but I wanted to give you a proper thank you for saving my dad and the island before you guys left. Please, take these and let me know what you think of them. The two boys took the suitcases that she handed them and were then quickly herded into a nearby locker room to try on the new costumes. The bases of their costumes remained the same, but that was about it. Shoto had been given a trench coat with a high white collar, black belt, armored shoulder pads and gloves that somehow completed his look, even though his second costume had been fine as it was. Izuku's, on the other hand, was essentially the same, but with better armor that covered his legs, arms and chest yet didn't hinder his movements at all. She also turned his old face mask into a working gas mask. What do you think, Shoto? The bi-colored teen activated both sides of his quirk before deciding, I think I like this. She really is quite talented at designing costumes. Melissa almost literally glowed at the praise the two bestowed upon her work. Here, take this. It is all my contact information. If you or your friends ever need any support items or upgrades to your costumes, just let me know. That's a promise, Melissa, Izuku said with a smile. And Kirishima getting that lost as canon to the movie, and though we don't have any E. A few days after returning from I Island, Hagakure texted the rest of Wanted to suggest that they all meet up at a mall near UA to go shopping for any last-minute items. However, unlike Izuku's first life, everyone was going. Since Shoto lived at the dorms and his mom had been transferred, he would easily be able to both visit her and go on the shopping trip. Kaken, on the other hand, had grown to at least tolerate most of the class, and he just couldn't say no to Kirishima at all any longer, so he was also joining them. Once the time had been set, Izuku sent a text to Momo and Kaken asking them to prepare meals for the day they left for the camp. Creati, why would we need to do that? Ground Zero. Because Aizawa-sensei is the sadistic type to have us start training before we even get to the camp? Why else? I'm betting that he will get us close and then drop us off, expecting us to get there on our own while dealing with obstacles that he set up beforehand. Valiant. Kaken has a point, Momo. He did lie to us about the logical ruse on our first day. Aizawa-sensei has a history of expelling entire classes on a whim. Besides, isn't it better to be safe than sorry? Considering how hard he's been pushing us, I think he's trying to get us licensed this year. A third year I know says that no one has gone through what we have since All Might made his debut, and back then, students were licensed as quickly as possible to deal with the number of villains that were roaming about. Creati, I'll get to work right away. Bakugo, let me know who you'll cover, and I'll do the rest. Izuku smiled before changing into his workout clothes to meet with Toshi-sensei the next morning. Just as he opened the door, though, he was stopped. Izuku, we need to talk, Kaken stated. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Kaken only called him by his proper name when it was serious, and he looked more serious than Izuku had seen since his revelation at the end of the sports festival. Toshi-sensei would have to wait. Once at the Kiyashi Ward Mall, Wana actually stuck together while getting things they all needed before splitting up for more personal items. Before they split up though, they were once again recognized, some from the sports festival, others from their more recent activity. "Hey, which of you are actually members of the Overcomers?" one of them asked. "3 of you were at Hasu. Then an extra 7 at I Island, so how many of you are members?" Fortunately, they had actually discussed it after the newspapers reported on their presence, so Izuku had a definitive answer. "We're all Overcomers, the entirety of 1A. I'd intended to only form the group after we'd graduated, but, well, circumstances forced our hands. So, the group was planned." "What's the intent?" another asked. "Although we would operate as individual heroes, should the need arise, we would team up to defeat any threat that comes our way. Any hero would be welcome to join or leave as they saw fit so long as the group remained," Izuku explained. "As for our intent, it's nothing less than to replace All Might as the symbol of peace." The entire crowd was utterly shocked at the answer, even more so than his classmates had been. The silence was only broken when one person spoke up, saying, "Replace the symbol of peace. That's a lofty goal. Do you mind if we talk about that?" Izuku immediately recognized the voice as Shimura Tenko. "Of course, we can." He turned to his classmates and told them, "Go on without me. I'll only be a few minutes." Most of them did so, but Shoto and Kaken had recognized the name. "Are you sure you'll be all right, Izuku?" Shoto asked. "I could let Toshinori-sensei know if you want." "I can't believe I'm agreeing with Icy Hot, but he has a point. The last time you two met, you hurt your leg," Kaken agreed. Kirishima, who had stayed with Kaken, raised his eyebrows in alarm, as he immediately figured out who Shimura actually was. As had happened too many times before, his courage failed him and he ran away, though as soon as he stopped, he pulled out his phone and dialed Toshinori-sensei. Izuku, Shoto and Shigaraki stared after the redhead while Kaken chased after him. "Izuku?" Shoto asked, reminding his friend about the question. Izuku just gave a brilliant smile that, honestly, did nothing to ease his mind. But it did tell him that Izuku was confident he had things under control. All right, he'd trust Izuku, but that didn't mean he'd trust the villain. He nodded to Izuku, walked by Shigaraki and then stopped right by his ear. "If you hurt him in any way," he whispered, "physically, mentally, hell, even emotionally, I will hunt you down and turn you into ash in the most excruciating manner possible, understand?" The villain paled and quickly nodded his assent. As Shoto walked away, Shigaraki stared at him. Well now, maybe Dabai had a point about the kid having potential. Between his threat here and his actions at the USJ that Sensei's spy had mentioned, it was clear that the split teen had a side that was comfortable with at least some moral ambiguity. "An interesting friend you have there. But that's not why I'm here." He led the two of them to a nearby table and only then did he start talking again. "When it comes right down to it, I hate basically everything and everyone. But right now, what grinds my gears the most is the hero killer. Everyone's gone obsessed with him. My attack on the USJ and the Nomus I unleashed in Hasu were all overshadowed by that bastard. No one's even given me a second thought. Why? He can grandstand all he wants. All he really did was destroy what he hated. What's the difference between us?" Izuku stared at Tenko in shock. Last time, he'd been too focused on staying alive to really answer. But now, you really don't get it, do you? He asked. "No, I don't. What am I missing?" Shimura asked. He was honestly surprised that the hero was so willing to be civil about this, let alone helpful. "The message is the difference. What do you actually want? To kill All Might. That's nothing new or impressive. And what happens after you kill him? Stain though, he had a goal, and he was working towards that goal. He didn't destroy things just because he hated them, but in order to achieve his goal. All Might, no matter what you think of him, had his own goal and he achieved it. Even your master has a goal and the power to at least attempt it. Until you have your own goal, one that you're willing to risk your life for, you will never have the following that others do. That's it. You sound like the hero killer yourself," Shigaraki complained. But he actually decided to think about what the young hero had said. He had actually had a point. What did he want after All Might died? Then his thoughts turned towards all the sheep around them and their happy smiles, like nothing could hurt them. Yes, that was it. He wouldn't just kill All Might. He'd destroy this peace that he'd created and remind everyone just how cruel the world really is. Yes, he would accept his fate as the greatest destroyer the world had ever known. Once he finished with Japan, he would move on and revel in the chaos and destruction he would create throughout the entire world. Sensei wanted to rule the world. Well, let him. He wouldn't settle for such a normal dream. Izuku stared at the villain. He had started worrying the moment Shimura had started introspecting, but his worry had shot up when he started laughing. At first it had been quiet, but now it was approaching almost stereotypical villain laughter, and that could be dangerous given the circumstances. As Shigaraki got up to leave, Izuku stopped him. "Wait, before you go, I have a question of my own. Let me guess, what's Sensei after?" "Who knows, really. I don't particularly care myself, as long as he helps me with my goal." I don't need to know what All for One is after, Izuku stated. Tamura turned to him in shock before Izuku continued. What I want to know is why do you want to kill All Might? Do you have a personal grudge against him or is it just because of All for One? If anything, the question had shocked the villain even more than his lack of interest in his master. No one had ever asked him that before. After a few minutes of thinking, he finally answered the young hero. It starts with when my quirk awakened. I'm sure you can imagine what happened that day. I can disintegrate things by touching them, and I killed my entire family, admittedly some of them on purpose. Afterwards, no one, not one single person, hero or otherwise, helped me, none except for Sensei. All Might, the symbol of peace and all the heroes that he inspired completely ignored me. Then he nearly killed the only real father I've ever had. I have plenty of reasons to hate All Might. With that, Shigaraki Tamura disappeared into the crowd. The police arrived 5 minutes later, by which time the villain was long gone. 2 hours and a debriefing later, Izuku walked out of the police station only to be ambushed by his mom. Izuku, baby, I can't do this anymore. My heart can't take any more scares like this. USJ, Stain, I Island and now this. I can't support you any longer if you're going to keep risking your life like this. Izuku just shook his head. Mom, pro heroes are always risking their lives. That's one of the key things that make them heroes. The fact that they are willing to risk their lives to save others. How could I call myself even a future hero if I wasn't willing to do the same? To Izuku's surprise, his mother actually got mad at that. It's those troublesome boys that you hang around with that put those ideas in your head. Izuku, give up these dreams, as well as your friendships with that Ada boy, that Todoroki and that Yaoyorozu, or you can find someplace else to live. Toshinori was quick to demand to know what she had against 3 of his best students. That Ada boy was directly responsible for my Izuku facing the hero killer. I can tell that girl is Midnight's daughter. I can only imagine how she's corrupting him. And what isn't wrong with the Todorokis? The father was arrested and the mother was put in an insane asylum. I will not have my boy associated with them. Izuku just sighed. If that's the way it has to be, Mom, then so be it. Toshinori's heart shattered at the answer, while Inko was pleased, until he spoke again. Do you want me to be gone tonight, or can I come by tomorrow to pick everything up? Izuku, what are you saying? I told you years ago that I was going to be a hero and that nothing was going to stop me, remember? Not even the idea that I was quirkless was going to stop me. And now you want me to cut ties from 3 of the best people that I know. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't. No, I won't do it, no matter what you say. If you won't support me, then I'll move into the dorms. Inko paled in shock, but her resolve didn't waver. Fine, if you want to associate with such disreputable people, do so. If anything of yours is left behind tomorrow, I'm getting rid of it. And you're sleeping at UA tonight. With that, she stormed off and was taken back home by Sansa, who was quick to notice that his charge was crying the entire way home. Back at the station, Toshinori turned to his disciple, who immediately hugged him and started crying into his shoulder. All he could do now was offer him whatever comfort he could by hugging him back. Did I do the right thing, Sensei? Izuku asked when his tears became manageable. The right thing? Toshinori asked. Can it ever be right to turn on your parents so fully because they worry about you? I don't know, but I do believe that it was the only thing that you could do under the circumstances. With what comfort he could derive from that, Izuku hugged his mentor again and the two took a car to the Midoriya's apartment to grab an overnight bag and Izuku's toiletries with plans to return the next day for the rest of his possession. Due to the large amount of stress he'd been through in the day, Izuku was quick to fall asleep on the drive to Heights Alliance. Toshinori decided that the best thing to do was to just let Izuku sleep, even after they arrived. When he carried his successor into the dorm, young Yaoyorozu was the first to notice. Izuku, Yagi-sensei, did something happen to him? And why did you bring him here? He's just had a bad day, that's all. After she heard about what happened with Shigaraki, his mother gave him an ultimatum that he had to refuse. So he's moving into the dorms, he responded as he sat his student on a couch in the commons. Young Todoroki, who had been studying with his classmate, was quick to ask about the ultimatum, and both teens were horrified by what Toshinori told them. I don't know what I'd do if Izuku left UA, Shoto said. I know, he's basically become our guiding light, Momo agreed. Izuku is the one that best embodies what it means to actually be a hero. She turned to Toshinori and asked, you know what I mean, right? You've at least heard about our exercises. Toshi just laughed at that. Oh, I've heard all right. First in and last out. No matter how much Aizawa chastises him for it. Trust me, that's just how he is, always has been. The first day I met him, he rushed into a situation that had pros hesitating just to save one person's life. That sounds like him, Shoto agreed with a smile, thinking about the sports festival. He's so strong that he's willing to do anything he can to help everyone else. And now it's our turn to help him, Momo said. We'll stay with him tonight and then help him move out tomorrow. Shoto smiled back in response before joining his friend on the couch. Momo did the same, sitting down on Izuku's other side and creating a blanket. Toshinori smiled, knowing that Izuku was in good hands. Unbeknownst to those on the ground floor, Uraraka had overheard everything and was already making plans to join them. Toshinori turned to leave, only to be stopped by Momo. "Wait, sir. Both you and Izuku have implied that you teach here, and even taught us before, but I don't recognize you. Will you explain that?" Toshinori laughed at her question before answering. "You'll know shortly after the training camp, young Yaoyorozu. I promise. That is, assuming that the League still attacks them. But then, Izuku has yet to be wrong about the future." Izuku was moved into the dorm right next to Shoto in order to help provide some level of comfort after being forced to move into the dorms. Exactly 4 days after that, Mono was reunited in order to head out to the training camp. Kendo and most of B were also excited, especially Tetsu, who was looking forward to working with Kirishima again. Of course, Monoma had to kill the good mood by mentioning a rumor that someone from A had failed. "Must have been someone from 2 or 3 then," Izuku said. "We all passed the finals." Monoma paled at that for a moment, causing Izuku to turn to Kendo. "What's wrong with him?" "Oh, he failed the practical part of the final, and only barely passed the written. Didn't help that he refused to ask for any tutoring and turned down our offers," Kendo explained. "I'm honestly starting to get worried about him. And Vlad-sensei isn't helping at all." Izuku stared at his B counterpart in shock. "How did he fail against the robots?" Kendo was about to answer when Kaminari started laughing. "Seriously? One of you failed fighting robots? I'd hate to see how you would have done with our practical." "What's that supposed to mean?" Hirwaro Shihai demanded. "It means that we fought the teachers, you dumbass," Bakugo answered. "And how many of you passed?" Tetsu asked. Kirishima slung his arm around his friend with a smile. "Come on, man, we're all here, aren't we?" Aizawa-sensei said if any of us failed, we wouldn't even be going on this trip. Monoma immediately started whimpering at that, while the rest of B stared in shock. How could they have defeated pros like their teachers? Momo was quick to notice and explain. "It's actually thanks to Izuku that we were all able to pass. He was brilliant enough to realize that the robots wouldn't be a challenge for us and that the teachers would face us. He even managed to figure out exactly who would face us and why," she finished, though she shared a secret glance with a few of her classmates. Kaminari of all people had been the first to bring it up, and things had just kept adding up since then. Their class rep had secrets, and they were worried, both about him and themselves. Those worries became even stronger when Izuku had them board the bus and took their phones from them, handing them over to Aizawa-sensei to hold for the entirety of the camp. And why did he insist on everyone using the restroom before they left? Interestingly, Izuku gave Aoyama a bottle of ginger ale before taking the back seat with Todoroki. The two of them were so comfortable with each other that she smiled, knowing that she would eventually be winning some money thanks to them. To pass the time, she started a conversation with Kyoka, who was quickly becoming one of her best friends. A few hours later, Momo had yet another piece of evidence in their favor when Aizawa-sensei stopped the bus, and Izuku simply smiled when he spotted the other car on the side of the road. Then, to her surprise, immediately after gushing about their trainers, the wild pussycats, he immediately went to introduce himself to the kid that was with them. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a bad idea, as the kid punched Izuku right where it hurt boys the most. I suppose I should explain that," Mandalay said as Shoto rushed to Izuku's side. While Shoto brought Izuku some relief with a cold hand, Mandalay told them Kota here is a cousin of mine. His parents were pros who were murdered 2 years ago, so he doesn't have a very appreciative view of heroes. Pixie Bob picked up from there. "So, if you're smart, you'll let him be, especially since you have work to do." "Work?" Minta whimpered. "Yep. The summer camp is at the base of the mountain way out there," Pixie Bob said, pointing in the general area. Everyone started getting a bad feeling about that, while Momo calmly walked to the luggage area of the bus and grabbed the 2 bags that she and Bakugo had prepared at Izuku's insistence. This was just a little too convenient, even considering the fact that everyone knew about Aizawa-sensei's sadistic side. It is currently 9:30 in the morning. If you're fast, you might get there by lunch. The grin on the pussycats' faces was positively predatory, and Momo braced herself as they were sent into the forest, Aizawa-sensei announcing that the training camp had begun. 3 hours into the forest, Izuku called for a break. "Okay everyone, we're making some good progress, but we're still a long way from camp. Fortunately, I planned for Aizawa's sadistic side. Kaken, pick your group to eat, the rest of us will cover for you." "No way, Deku. We're going to keep fighting and you can eat." Kirishima, raccoon eyes, soy sauce, glasses, bird, perv, Frenchie, arms and big lips, you're with me. With that, Momo broke into the bags and pulled out the meals for the remaining students. "Oh, and one more thing, Deku. Keep track of how many beasts you take down. I want to know which of our groups is better." Pixie Bob froze in shock for a moment. When Aizawa asked what was wrong, she said your students just dared to split into 2 groups so that one of them could have lunch. I'm not sure if I'm furious or impressed. Can I have one of them? Aizawa just glared at her in response. As they ate, Izuku smiled at his classmates. They had all become much closer than they were the first time around, helped by the fact that Momo and Shoto were more sociable, and Kaken wasn't constantly threatening them. And Yue wasn't being maligned by the press at all, so the fallout from the camp should be much better, even with Kaken's plan. The only question was when the league would show up, considering the precautions that they had taken this time. Izuku really didn't want to doubt his classmates, but it was better safe than sorry. He was just about to take another bite of katsudon when he remembered something he needed to take care of. Turning to Momo, he asked, "Do you think you could make something if you had the plans for it and list of materials?" "Let me see what you have," Momo replied. Izuku handed her the plans, allowing her to look over them. "These are some intricate plans, Izuku." "Oh, they're by Melissa Shield, no wonder." Then she smirked at Izuku and asked, "So, we should expect a gas attack at camp. Should I make enough for everyone in NB?" "That's a great idea," Izuku answered, too focused on enjoying his lunch to truly pay attention. "I don't think the league will attack before our 3rd day, but better to be prepared." "What?" he asked, having finally noticed everyone looking at him. "You don't realize what you said, do you?" Momo asked. "So, when are you going to trust us with your secrets, Izuku?" Izuku just barely managed to keep from reacting to that. "What are you talking about, Momo? I trust you guys completely, and I don't have any secrets." That was one of the few out-and-out lies he had told since his return. "Oh yeah, then how long has All Might been training you?" Hagakure asked. That did cause him to panic. "What are you talking about? All Might's not training me." "Well, I mean, he's not training me any more than he does you guys." Ajiro grinned at him. "Come on, Midoriya, you're not fooling anyone. How many times has he pulled you aside after class? We know he's training you, we just don't know why or in what." "Yeah, come on man," Kaminari spoke up. "I noticed something was up back at the USJ. You knew what was going on as soon as 13 finished her speech. You certainly sounded scared, but you were definitely more determined than anything else. Just spill already. Not to mention the fact that you clearly talked about the future just now," Jiru added. "Is the league going to attack us or not?" Izuku opened and closed his mouth, utterly shocked at the question and unsure of how to answer. Fortunately, Shoto recognized how his friend was feeling and decided to break the tension. "Nor have you admitted that you're All Might's secret love child." "Shoto," Izuku groaned, slapping his face. Their classmates turned to stare at Shoto before bursting out laughing. "How many times do I have to tell you? It's not like that, you blasted conspiracy theorist." "How many times has Todoroki asked that?" Uraraka asked. "At least once a week since the sports festival," Izuku groaned. "Why am I even friends with you?" he asked. "As I recall, I said that I wasn't here to make friends," Shoto answered with a smile. "But you insisted on tearing down my walls and declared us friends. And you know something, Izuku? I don't regret a single second of it." Izuku gave a huge grin at that, one almost reminiscent of All Might to Shoto's eye, while certain members of the group quietly grumbled. Things like that made them worry about their finances. "Oh, and Uraraka, I was only really serious about my question the first 2 times. Every other time I've asked was when Izuku started getting stressed about something. It always distracts him." "Shoto." His friend just smiled at him, and Izuku shook his head. Turning back to the others, he gave them an answer. "I wish I could tell you, but right now it's too dangerous. After the camp though, I will explain everything." Finally, at about 6 in the evening, one arrived triumphantly at the Pussycat's base. They may have been tired, but they were standing tall and triumphant. Pixie Bob was extremely excited to see them arrive and pounced on them as soon as they entered the clearing. "So, which one of you came up with the idea of stopping and actually eating in the beast's forest?" Ada was quick to promote Midoriya's foresight, analysis, and planning, which only made Aizawa more suspicious of his problem child. All Might kept claiming that he was an analytical genius, but this seemed to be pushing it. However, he lost his train of thought as said problem child kicked Pixie Bob so hard she flew what looked like twice the height of the trees before she fell back to the ground in a daze. "And a crater. I like it, I like it. Will you please be my mate?" "No, no, 1,000 times, no. Why would I want to mate with someone who's twice as old as me?" Pixie Bob rushed to him and stated, "I'm pretty sure your math's off. I'm 18 at heart." That just caused Midoriya to launch her again. "Ugh, this is going to be a long week," Aizawa thought with a groan before giving his students their instructions for the evening. As much as he had hated to, Izuku had not changed mind his attempt to see the girls while they were bathing. First, it provided another reason for the little perv to be expelled, something that the entire class was hoping for by this point, and both Izuku and Momo were keeping records of those reasons. Second, Koda's reaction was truly just perfect. And third, Izuku wouldn't be surprised if him saving Koda had been the first step to breaking through Koda's own walls. Besides, he had given up on trying to curb mind his perviness months ago. and as a result, him and Momo were working on another plan to deal with him. Fortunately, that was last night. Today, all 40 of them had been training with their quirks. Something that Izuku had already had his classmates doing since the announcement about the sports festival. As such, O was treated to a rare sight. A surprised Aizawa when he read Kaken's throwing distance had improved by over 100 meters. Kirishima had figured out Unbreakable and was working to boost its durability and how long he could make it last. Shoto's power over his fire was greatly improved due to Endeavor's changed outlook and relatively public training, so he focused on learning to use both sides at the same time. Kaminari had boosted his safe power output to 3 million volts. Uraraka had raised the amount of weight she could lift as well as her endurance. Ashido had strengthened her acid. Dark Shadow had grown stronger through constant use during the day, and Ida was faster and his engines could endure greater stress. Now though, the Pussycats were putting them through far more intensive training than Izuku or Toshi-sensei could provide outside of UA. The Pussycats had all been impressed, with Tiger even saying that he'd never seen such a skilled and powerful group of first years before. Even so, by the end of the first day, I was still completely exhausted. Fortunately for them, they didn't have to suffer with the truly horrid curry that Izuku had the first time around. He'd quickly identified the best cooks in the class and put them in charge of actually making the curry while the others merely prepared the ingredients. As a result, even those like Kirishima and Siro who preferred to just stuff their mouths took the time to enjoy every bite. All except Kota, that is. As before, Izuku had to follow him to his little hideaway cave. And as before, he blew up at Izuku's arrival. Rather than be interested in the mere existence of the hideout though, Izuku started up the conversation he wanted to. It's not fair, is it? Life, I mean. If it were, your parents would still be here. But you'd be surprised at how good you still have it. What would you know? Kota demanded. Izuku smiled before answering. There's this little girl I know, she's about your age. When her quirk manifested, she accidentally killed her father, causing her mother to abandon her. Her grandfather cared about her, but due to his position, handed her to his protege, who then tortured her to understand her quirk. Because of that, I've never once seen her smile because she just doesn't understand what happiness is. I've been visiting her, trying to help her, but nothing's worked so far. You have a cousin who clearly cares about you taking care of you. Do you really have things so bad when compared to someone else? Shut up. If my parents hadn't been so busy showing off, they'd still be here. Are you sure about that? Izuku asked. What's that supposed to mean? Kota demanded. What's the most popular game that kids play? Heroes and villains, of course. Stupid game, stupid names, he grumbled. And do you know what one of the most popular games was before quirks? Why would I know something stupid like that? It was cops and robbers, Izuku said. Kota looked at him in utter confusion. What did that have to do with anything? Some people are going to commit crimes with or without having quirks, and some people are going to do their best to either save others or catch the criminals with or without quirks. From what I remember about your parents, I think they would have been firefighters or police officers if quirks never existed. And the sad truth is that those jobs have always been and always will be dangerous ones that not everyone goes home from. A psychopath like Muscular, someone who is sick enough to enjoy killing. He's definitely one that would have been a killer without a quirk, and your parents were very brave to even try to stand up to him. And that's what really makes someone a hero, you know. A true hero is someone who sees a challenge, then chooses to stand up and face it, even knowing that they might fail and that it's not their problem to solve. That didn't work as well as he had hoped, as Kota picked up a stone and threw it at his head. Get lost, he shouted, before throwing another stone. Izuku did as the boy asked, praying that his words would get through to him anyways. If not, then he'd still take down Muscular, no matter the cost. It had been worth it just to save Kota before, and he knew it would still be worth it this time. The next morning, when Pixie Bob announced the test of courage, Izuku spoke up and asked her to make certain that there was no one else around. His question immediately made certain members of a look up in fear. Was the League of Villains nearby? Was the attack that Izuku expected coming tonight? Fortunately, Ragdoll was quick to announce that there was no one around who shouldn't be around, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. That night, Ragdoll double-checked the area, and upon relieving everyone's fears again, the Pussycats announced the rules and the two classes were divided into teams, with Kiruwaro Shihai being the member of B left on his own. Since he could merge with shadows, he didn't mind one bit. Also, with all of having passed the exam, Izuku had a partner this time in the form of Kirishima. However, that didn't last long as Kaken was quick to demand that they switch partners. As the blonde had ended up with Shoto again, everyone was happy to make the switch. Outside of the Pussycats, that is. By the time the first round ended, Takage Satsuna and Yanagi Ryuko had won the contest via body horror and Yanagi making things move that shouldn't be moving. For the second round, Izuku and Shoto had come up with the most dastardly plan to win that they could think of. And to pull it off, they asked Momo for a little help. Kendo Izuku grinned as she walked down the path for the test of courage. Between her cool head and Tetsu's desire to be manly, there was no way they could fail to beat A. As they passed the halfway point though, they were surprised to encounter fog. Wait, what's going on, Kendo? There shouldn't be fog tonight, right? No, the weather's too warm for that. Something weird is going on here. Her odd feeling only grew stronger when she heard the screams of Kaibara-sen and Komori Kinoko ahead, and a whispered leave. A few minutes later, when they had moved even deeper into the ever-thickening fog, Shisada Jiroda and Kemkiri Tagaru also started screaming, while the whispering voice had changed to leave this place. Kendo, I think we should listen to the voice, Tetsu said. To Itsuka's shock, he was very nearly whimpering when he said that. What's wrong, Tetsu? Don't tell me you're afraid of a little ghost story. When Tetsu started shivering in response, she knew that yes, he was afraid of ghost stories. Well, she could use that. Come on, don't you want to impress Kirishima? You're facing one of your true fears in this. Can he say the same? As planned, that perked him up immediately. No, he can't. Let's go. Leave this place, or you will be damned. The fog just kept getting thicker, almost to the point that they couldn't even see each other, let alone anything further ahead than a meter. The deeper they went, the more the voices called out, warning them to leave, but Kendo kept them going. Soon though, more voices were added. Only these voices were laughing. New souls to feast on. Then they saw them, 3 Tengu coming at them from above, and definitely not moving on strings. Kendo, Tetsu whimpered. I saw them, Kendo stated, but Tetsu just pointed in front of them. Now even Kendo was scared, because right in their path was a glowing red circle and a bouncing red and blue flame. What was going on here, and who was doing this? Feast on their souls, the Tengu cried out. And with that, their courage broke and they ran screaming out of the forest and back to camp. Well, for this one, there's no question about the winners, Mandalay stated. By an overwhelming margin, the winners are Todoroki Shoto and Midoriya Izuku with their fog and Tengu act. How did you do that, anyways? Todoroki smiled as he provided the answer. I cooled the air enough for the fog to be created, then intensified my flame until it started turning blue. Izuku provided the voices for the lost souls and played Tengu by putting a mask in each hand and one on his right leg.